All right, we are live. Thank you for the handful of people that are out there watching right now. We are diving into Hackathon number 2. First one went pretty well, I think, and we're gonna try to do it again. I do have beer this time. It's a little bit darker, so hopefully we are successful. So I get to drink during the daytime. If not, I get to go hang my head in shame and curl up in bed or something along those lines. So for everybody that is tuned in, what we're going to try to do today is from a request that we had from LinkedIn or Facebook, one of the places that we posted that we're going to do this. And we're actually going to attempt to create a simple link in custom action in Iconik that sends a video to YouTube. Maybe you guys want to send stuff to YouTube from time to time. The general gist of this, though, would work with pretty much any service that has a API endpoint that you can send stuff to. We're going to collect a lot of information inside Iconik, and we are going to then send that information to the third-party service, and then potentially get that information back from that third-party service and update Iconik with some searchable information too. So, full disclosure, I did spend a little more time working on the YouTube API than just this stream. I'm not a developer. I think we've been over that a few times already, but the idea is that the YouTube authentication system is based on the Google OAuth authentication system, and I'm a bit of a neophyte, and it took me a while to get that part working. So I spent a little bit of time this week figuring out at least how to authenticate to YouTube to start making calls and getting commands back, and we'll try to go into that a little bit, but take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I may be explaining it wrong, and you might want to read a little bit further as we go into this. So as always, I think we'll start. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is start recording, because I said all that, and we weren't recording this for anybody else seeing it in the future. So people that are watching this on the replay, guess what? You just missed the first 30 seconds of me saying hello. Sorry. But what we're going to do is let's take a quick look here at our overview and our goals for this. So we're going to, this is kind of a meta code or a decision list, an outline, however you want to call it, to build our little functionality today. So we're going to build a custom action that is called send to YouTube. And when we go to a video, we're going to send that video to YouTube. We're going to build a cloud function to accept that request. We did that on last week's show as well, or last month's show as well, so we can talk a little bit more about that. And we're going to use something new, a new piece of technology that we didn't use last time, which is called PubSub. And the reason we're going to do this is because what ends up happening in these cases is when we're making cloud-to-cloud calls with things like cloud functions and using custom actions, that's not a problem. But in the case where we're doing this, we're going to actually have to grab that video and then transfer it to YouTube. YouTube doesn't have an opportunity for us to pull data from a URL in their API, so we do have to push data to it, which means we're going to build a little temporary holder where we can download that data and re-upload it inside of our application. That's not going to work inside of a cloud function. Cloud functions only have so much RAM available to them. They're on demand. So what we're going to do is use this this little PubSub here, and what that's going to do is allow us to send a command from cloud to cloud, and then we'll have a little application running on-prem. In this case, it'll be on my laptop. And in theory, this doesn't need to run on-prem. It can run in a cloud container or your own deployment or something along those lines. But what we're going to do is we're going to have that PubSub listen to that request and then inform our application on-prem. And if we do it this way, we don't have to do any poking holes in firewalls or redirecting to ports or anything along those lines. We can just have our PubSub listen to that. And I'll go into that a little bit later as well. So to build our script, there's a few things we got to do. We're going to get our asset ID in Iconik from our PubSub queue. So cloud function sends to PubSub. PubSub then sends to our script. That's what we're going to be listening to, is the PubSub in our script. And we're going to get the asset ID from that. Then we're going to use Iconik's API to look up the original item and upload that to YouTube. And then depending on how much time we have, we could say, hey, if we can't find that file because it's on a remote ISG or to a location we can't have, we could either transfer the proxy over, or we could build yet another function that says, hey, let's build another queue that transfers that file to the cloud so that our consumer, our little script here, can access that file regardless of where the script is running in the world. So it doesn't have to run on all these different endpoints. We're going to download that file, whatever that is, the original or the proxy, whatever we decide on. We're going to use YouTube's API to upload that video to YouTube. We're going to add some video information into Iconik metadata, some functional information. And then what we're also going to do, if we have time, if we get all this stuff working, is we're going to check every few minutes or hour or whatever it is that we determine for all the items that we've sent to YouTube, and we're going to get statistics on them. And we're going to search for all those items in Iconik because we're going to have the information that we got back from the original content creation in Iconik. We're going to post that in one single list, YouTube's video API list, and then we're going to get our view count, likes, dislikes, and how many people have favorited that video back into Iconik. So those are now searchable metrics inside of Iconik, which means that I can go and search Iconik and say, hey, show me everything where the like count was over, 200 or whatever the case may be. So we're going to parse that returned list, loop through it if we need to, because if it's multiple pages, we might need to do that. And then we're going to find that item inside Iconik, loop through that list, and then update that with all of those counts. So a lot of stuff on the table for today. Hopefully we can get it all done. Again, we're doing this from the hip, so we're going to learn as we go together a little bit. And Matthias is saying we could fetch all the public comments from YouTube and add that back into Iconik. We could also do that. So if time allows and we want to start monkeying with that, we can do that as well. So maybe we'll grab comments and make time-based comments or static comments as well. That might be a little messy if you have a popular video, though. Some of those have a couple 100,000 comments. So hopefully we have that problem to deal with in the future. So let's dive into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create this custom action inside of Iconik. So I'm going to fire up a new window here. I'm going to log into Iconik really quickly. And I'm going to go to admin. And I'm going to go to settings and custom actions. And I'm going to create a new custom action that is called send to YouTube. And I'm going to make that a post. So the difference here between a post and an open is the context in which Iconik sends information. A post is going to use it works just like the webhooks that we did use in our last demonstration. It's going to send that cloud to cloud. So it's going to post a JSON with the information around that particular asset to the endpoint that we decide. Now, that said, excuse me, we could do an open. And what an open does is actually opens it in the local context. So it opens a new URL, whatever this URL is, and instead of Iconik sending that information to maybe another server or a cloud function, a Lambda function, something along those lines, it actually says, computer that clicks the button, open that URL. And that URL can have an application handler or something along those lines. So you can build complex local application integrations. We're not going to get too deep into that today because, frankly, we're just not going to have time to. But we'll come back to that probably in the future to show how to do some fun stuff in local context with custom actions in the future. Context. So what this means is when I run this custom action, where can I run it? Can I run it on an asset? Can I run it on bulk, meaning with multiple items selected? Can I run it? Is it runnable from a shared asset, which we won't be doing in this case, shared collection, those sorts of things. So I'm actually going to do it in two different places. I'm going to do it in assets. And then I'm not going to use a metadata view right now. We might come back and actually do that because we might want to add some information to our YouTube video that's not in standard metadata. And we'll explain that when we come back to it. And for right now, I'm going to use our old friend webhook.site to actually create a temporary webhook so we can see what happens when we start sending these custom actions around. So I'm going to grab this URL. I'm going to hop back over to Iconik. I'm going to paste that in. And I am going to actually, first I'm going to make a new, before I do any of this, I'm going to do what I should have done a little while ago, and that is make a new application token for our little tool here. So I'm going to call this YouTube send app. And I'm going to run that as Joe Producer because he's got the same rights as the last week we used him. Hit add, and I'm going to create this new key. I'm going to copy that, and I'm actually going to put that into a new document real quickly, just so that I have it. All right. So let's hop back into Iconik again. Start where I was going. Custom actions. Send to YouTube. And it's going to be a post. And the context is going to be asset. And we're not going to use a metadata view. And I'm going to send it to our webhook site for right now. And I'm going to use our YouTube send app key. And boom, we've got it created. So what that did in Iconik for us is if I go now to any asset in the system and go into the asset itself, you'll notice up in the corner here now, there's a new send to YouTube button. And when I click that send to YouTube button, you can see send to YouTube was triggered. And then I actually got a post into our webhook. So this is the information that got sent from Iconik when I sent that custom action. And you can see it tells me the context of it, and it tells me all of the items, more or less, that have been used in this case. So you can see the domain ID, the user ID, the action ID, which are the actual IDs of the custom action itself. But this is the asset ID of that asset that got sent. And if we hop back, you can actually see that it's the exact same. It's C160 blah, 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 C160 blah, 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 blah. So same exact thing going on there. So now that we know that we can get our asset, we're going to do one other one. We're going to do a bulk one as well here, so that if we want to work on multiple assets. So I'm going to go back to my admin, and I'm going to go to settings and custom actions, and I'm going to call this one send multiple to YouTube, because we're actually going to be running this from a bulk setting. So you can see we set it to bulk. And I'm going to send it to the same action because our logic's going to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste the exact same location in, use our YouTube send app, hit add. And now what you're going to notice is if I hop back into Iconik and do a search result, I can select multiple items. And now you can see there's a send multiple to YouTube. And when I select that, actually I'm going to do one other thing really quickly here is I'm going to search for a specific term. So we'll do this because we know that it's there. So I'm going to select everything here. And what you'll notice is that there's a few assets. There's 3 different assets. There's also 2 collections in there. I can still send multiple to YouTube. If we hop back to our webhook now and take a look at the new one that just came in, you'll notice that it says asset IDs and collection IDs. Well, we could get really fancy here and recurse through all the collections and send everything that was in all of those collections to YouTube. That's probably not a good idea. So what I'm going to do in the scope of this particular, job is I'm going to frankly just ignore if collection IDs are sent to us via our via our custom action. But I know all of the asset IDs that get sent. I get that list when we go and make our post. So what I'm going to do real quickly, just like before, I'm going to take this response. I'm going to hop open my code editor, and I'm just going to paste it in and, save it really quickly as a JSON file so I get contextual code editing. So I'm going to call this example bulk response.json, right? And now I can come back and reference this when we start to write our code in a little bit. But I know what's going to happen, what kind of information I'm going to be getting from Iconik now. So we've created our custom action. First thing done. Look at that. Knocked it off the list in under 15 minutes. Pretty good. So what we're going to do here now is... oh, hey, awesome. Jeff's cat is watching me. Hi, Jeff's cat. How you doing? The dog cam is running. As you can see today, dog not found because dog is outside. Dog will probably come back at some point, and when the dog comes back, dog cam will be a little bit more active. Dog cam can talk to cat cam. We can have some fun here. All right, back to nerd stuff. because dogs talking to cats on the internet's not nerdy at all. All right, and actually I'm going to pull this up really quickly because I think this is kind of awesome. How do I download this there? Download that. Just so you guys are all aware, that's what's happening in Canada right now. There are cats watching the live stream. So it's cold there. Makes sense. I don't want to be outside either. Cool. All right, so next up, we got to build our cloud function to accept the request from our custom action. So we're going to build our cloud function so that when we send our custom action, we're not going to be sending it to webhook.site anymore. We're going to send it to our actual cloud function. And I'm going to use Google to do that. So I'm going to log into our Google console, Cloud Console here. And believe it or not, I've already written a cloud function to do this, and probably sometime in the next week or so, I am going to post all the code to all this sort of stuff in a public GitHub repository so you guys can see it and grab it and play with it yourself. I forgot to do that after the last one, and shame on me for not doing that, because there's no reason why you guys shouldn't have access to the stuff that we're writing here. But I'm going to take you in and show you the cloud function that we've written, assuming Google lets me click on the cloud function button. It's a fun bug. We'll have to go through the menu. Where is it? Cloud functions. There we go. So what I've built with this particular cloud function, we're just going to kind of copy and paste this and reuse it. Is essentially a very, very simple cloud function that uses Google's own pub sub. And this is not that different than what you do with Amazon if you're using SQS or any sort of similar tool within Microsoft's world or even in the private world. But what it's essentially doing is it's taking in that JSON file. Remember the one that we got when we sent the custom action over here. And it is converting it. Basically, it's creating a new publisher to publish a message to a pub sub. It's grabbing the topic, which we're going to have to go create in a second here. And it's just saying, okay, the JSON that comes in, or this object is the JSON that comes in, and then it is encoding it in the proper format for publishing to a pub sub. And then I've also got a little function that I've written that basically decodes that again from the pub sub. So we're just passing the JSON, but the pub subs take their own kind of messaging information because you can kind of send anything you want in a pub sub queue. It's not just for JSON, it's for kind of any bits of small binary information you want to send and then have machines down on-prem talk to. Or anywhere, really. It's just kind of a cool tool for doing that. So I'm going to just take this, copy it. And the other thing that's important to notice here is that in the requirements doc, I am using Google's Cloud pub sub for making this. And then I'm going to copy that as well, just so that we have it quickly. Hop back to function details. And we're going to make a new function. And we're going to call this one Iconik YouTube pub sub. And I am going to say, okay, all good. We're not going to require authentication for this one, just like last time. And I'm going to hit next. And I'm going to change this to Python because that's what I'm using. And we're going to go ahead and paste in our requirements from the other one. And we're actually going to paste in our pub sub here as well. And the only thing we've got to do now is go create a new pub sub and a topic. So we're going to go do that really quickly as well. I'm going to click deploy on this. Actually, yeah, I'll click deploy on this really quickly. Oh, I got to change the endpoint too. So you can see up here the entry point when you make a new one is hello world. We don't have a hello world function anymore. We only have one, which is send to pub sub. So that's going to be our entry point. Make sure we replace that. I'm going to hit deploy. I am going to have to edit this in a second because we're going to have to replace that, but we can get this going in the background. And hop over here again to our Google Cloud and go down. I use these enough. I'm going to pin this. It's kind of annoying that it's always down there. And I'm going to do the same thing with pub sub when I find it. Where is it? It's always down the bottom here. Pub sub, pin that guy as well. So now what I'm going to do is inside my pub subs, I'm going to create a new topic, and I'm going to call this YouTube Publish. I'm going to create the topic. And then I am going to go into that and create a subscription as well. So I'm going to create a new subscription. That subscription is going to be Iconik, and it's going to be in my YouTube Publish. So it's basically saying Iconik is going to subscribe to this topic, and we're going to do a pull from that. So we're going to use Google's SDK to do all that. Rest of this we can just leave at default. Let it go. Boom. Now we've got our topic and our subscription. I'm going to really quickly copy this just so that we have it, so we don't have to keep coming back to this page, and throw it into our little note tab here. So new text document with a note tab. Hop back over. And now what we're going to do is hop back to our cloud function, which is probably deployed by now, and we're going to edit it. So we're going to go into our Iconik YouTube pub sub, and we are going to go to our source, main, and we're going to edit it. Next. And this time we're going to change the topic from the one I was using in my other collection to what we just put into our little notepad here. So the subscription name or topic name is this. So hop back over. That's the topic name. And then the topic itself is this. And hit deploy. And now what this is going to do is allow us to start sending messages from Iconik into our pub sub. And if any of this doesn't make sense to anybody right now, feel free to throw it into the chat and we can dive a little deeper. I can take the dog cam whiteboard and we can draw some stuff up if we want to. But the general idea here is that Iconik is going to send cloud to cloud to a Google Cloud function. Google's Cloud function is then going to basically build a queue for us so that we don't have to build our own database or our own list to work from or whatever. That's what a pub sub is. It's just a list of things to be worked on. And then we're going to use Google's pub sub API in our little script to just get notifications when those new items hit that so that we can start working on them. All right, so... And I'm going to be drinking a ton of water because it's, fall and I've got sniffles. All right. So this is almost done, but while it is publishing here, we can actually go and grab our trigger. And the trigger URL is copied now. And now I can hop back to Iconik and go to our custom actions. So settings and custom actions. And I'm going to replace, for our send multiple to YouTube, I'm going to edit this custom action, replace it with our trigger, which I didn't copy properly. So let's go back to our cloud function. There it is. Copy. Oh, it wasn't deployed yet, so I couldn't copy it. And hit update. And I'm going to do the same for our send to YouTube down here that's on the asset context. Edit. Replace that. Update. Cool. So... if we've done all of this right so far, we have a cloud function now deployed. And again, this is just, this stuff actually, if you want to look this up too on your own, this is literally a copy and paste from one of the Google tutorial docs on how pub subs work. And you can have technically, if you're doing fancier development, you can have webhooks write directly into pub subs, but then it's not in the JSON format. And to me, that's confusing and I don't understand how it works. So I'd probably be doing this wrong from a developer perspective, but it works just fine. So, all right. So now if we hop back into Iconik and we go to one of our assets now and we do our send to YouTube, it's going to send to YouTube. And hopefully, if this all worked right, we can look into the logs and see that this was triggered and hopefully exited cleanly as well, because we're not going to know here. So it's going to take a second. So that updated, let's see, that was 2:23. So that was a couple minutes ago was the most recent log. So it's going to take a few seconds for us to show the new logs. The other thing we can do is hop over to our pub sub itself in here. So let's go to my go here and go to PubSub and topics. And if we go to our YouTube published topic, we should be able to see, if I remember correctly, view messages. And go take a look at this one and do a pull, but I'm not acking it. So acking means that your application actually is acknowledging that it has that message and it's going to work on it. So if I hit ack, that message would disappear forever because my application is grabbing it. But you can see, actually, we got all of our Iconik info into the message body here, and it's a little hard to see it in this little goofy view, but this will make sense. Again, you can see it actually grabbed all the info and then sent our JSON and that whole thing. So our cloud function is now functioning properly. It is sending JSON from Iconik, wrapping it into a PubSub, and now that's available. So let's go back to our fun little list of things we got to do. We built the cloud function, and that's working. And we built our PubSub, which is now also working. So all of the kind of infrastructure related stuff that we needed to do to get to this point is now complete. We shouldn't have to go really back into the Cloud Console too much, because the rest of the debugging we can actually do at our script level. We're going to get messages. The only other thing we're going to have to do is be sending messages pretty periodically just to test and make sure things work. Cool. So let's start building our script. So like I said earlier, I did do a little bit of homework before this on YouTube's authentication systems. And I wrote a couple of very, very quick and dirty scripts that I got working. So if we go into my code folder and go into our Iconik YouTube folder, I have got this video upload example and this test clip, thing. And you'll notice that these are almost identical. If we actually scroll down a little bit and take a look at them. So this one, which is the test one, actually just gets all the information about a specific video ID or video IDs. So you can see we have multiple IDs in there. We'll get into this a little bit more later. And this one actually does the upload of the video. So there's some information here. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the information regarding the video itself. And then this is the actual call to upload the video, and then we get back the response. The hard part, and the thing that took me for frickin' ever to figure out here, is this whole Google authentication flow with scopes and all that sort of stuff. So it looks really simple because it's only 2 lines, but figuring out what the right one was and which libraries to come in and that sort of thing, that did take me a little while to figure out. And if you want to learn more about this, if you go to the YouTube, well, actually, I just did YouTube API video upload, and they actually have a full example right in their developer docs. And that walks through the requirements here of how this all works and the requests and all that sort of stuff. But what it also has is an example script down here that's got way more information than I really needed. And I was trying to strip down that to its bare bones to figure out how it works. They also have inside their little client libraries here, they've got one for Python. And if you go to that, that's got a bunch of examples, samples here for various different YouTube functions. And they've got a little descriptor of all these various different functions and things along those lines. There's also in YouTube's documentation, let's go to YouTube API. There's a getting started guide pretty much here. So if you kind of look at this authorize requests here, and again, OAuth is like this weird mystery to me that I don't fully understand. The general concept of it is that you're not actually sending direct credentials to the calls you're trying to make. You're sending credentials to an authenticator, and then the authenticator gives you back a time-based token. That token can then be used for a period of time to make calls to the application, but your username and password is never actually sent to the application itself. And this is the only way the YouTube API works for a variety of different functions. They do have API keys, but they're only for read, I believe. You can't actually use them to write any information into things. And so you have to create these flows. I'm using a server-side flow right now, which basically means when I run the script, it's going to prompt me just like when I log into Google Docs or whatever for my authentication information, and then that starts an authentication flow. So every time I start my script, I'm going to have to do that. If my script's running in a loop, I believe if I read the documentation right, their little flow creator will auto refresh those tokens for me. So as long as my script's running, we're good to go. But that's not necessarily true. I could be completely wrong about that, and we could roll this thing out and find out we got to fix some things around authentication. All of that said, the way we really get down to it is within YouTube itself. Let's hop back over here. There is, if you click through some of these, you got to go to the whoops, I clicked the wrong one. Link there. You go to this Google API console, and then you go to the credentials page. And then from the credentials page, when you log in, if your developer account is tied to a YouTube channel, and I actually ran into this problem as well, is I didn't have a YouTube channel for my actual user account. Well, then I couldn't actually publish anything. It just kept saying, access denied. So if you're testing this on your Google Cloud account, which is not your personal account, make sure that you've created a channel so that this stuff actually can work. And then what we've done, you can see there's a handful of things here for web applications and tokens and API keys and stuff like that. Frankly, I'm not using any of that right now. I am using this Iconik desktop one that is doing a server-to-server flow for our authentication. And that creates a JSON file that I download. That JSON file you'll see referenced in our code. So you'll see there's this client secret.json. That client secret.json file is what I downloaded from that Google web page, and that just lives in this right now. It just lives in the same folder as my script. So if I go to my code and Hackathon YouTube, there's the client secret JSON. So that includes the keys that are necessary to make this OAuth flow work after you've authenticated once. And to show you guys that this stuff actually works, what I'm going to do is just pop open a terminal and go to my folder there. So cd desktop code, Iconik, no, YouTube. Oh, another thing that I'm using here, and I think it might make sense for us to go into this a little bit because you guys may not have experience in this. There is a tool when you're building Python called virtual env. And what virtual env does is allows you to define which version of Python you want and then consolidate that all into one directory. So if you look right now, you can see there's a bin directory and a lib directory and an include directory and a bunch of things. That's and this py virtual environment config file. That's because I created a virtual environment. I highly recommend you guys do a little Googling on Python virtual env and read about that. And again, if you guys have questions on that or whatever, I am happy to dive a little deeper. But the idea is that you're not going to be tied to the system environment for your application. You can kind of keep it all together and encapsulated and then run inside that world. So let's say you have you're running an older version of Mac OS that only supports Python 2.7, but you want to write your code in 3.8. You're not dependent upon the OS version of Python. You could use brew to install Python 3.8 or 3.9 or whatever, and then you can also create a virtual env and keep your libraries and everything and all that versions separate. So I've done that already, and I'm going to activate that virtual environment. And now you'll notice it says, oh, you're in the Iconik YouTube virtual environment, which means that, well, here, I'll show you this in action. If I run Python right now, look at it, it's Python 3.9. If I open a new window and just run Python, which is in my native Mac OS one, you can see it says, hey, you're in Python 2.7, it's not recommended 2.7.6 because it's the default that comes with the OS, and that's that sort of thing. So what I'm doing is allowing myself to use a dedicated environment so that all of this stuff can get packaged together. The other thing that you normally do, and you actually have noticed this happen when I built the cloud function, is there was that requirements.txt doc. I don't have one yet, so I'm actually going to make one really quickly. So I'm going to go into my code here. And what the requirements doc is it's basically saying, hey, if you hand your code to someone else and they make a virtual environment, which modules you need to run this code, and then you can really quickly just do a pip install requirements, pip-r install requirements.txt, and it'll go grab all the libraries from that. So, and the actual libraries themselves, so let's go to our requirements here. We'll save this as requirements.txt. And then what I'm actually going to do is go back to the credentials and API services page, because believe it or not, when you go through their little example code for the quick start, it actually gives you all of the libraries and what they're actually called. So let's say Python. So you can see we're going to need the Google Python API client because I'm using that. So I literally just paste that in there. And then I'm going to grab the Google OAuth lib, and last but not least, HTTP2 lib. Boom. So those are the requirements so far that we need. If we install any other dependencies today to do our stuff, we can add it here. And then when I give this code to you guys and you want to try running it, you don't have to go hunting down what all these different libraries are that we're using that are not baked into Python by default. All right. I hope that made sense, because I realized that was pretty rambling now that I'm saying it out loud. Okay, so back to our shell here, because I did take a giant sidetrack there, and I'm just going to run python test.py. And test.py is a really simple one that it just goes and gets the status on 2 of my YouTube videos. If you want to take a look at this again really quickly, it authenticates. It grabs the credentials that are needed for future functions. It creates a new object called YouTube, which is basically telling me creating the scope and everything along those lines. And then I make a request to that object. This is all inside of YouTube's Python SDK. So I learned all this crap this week just reading through it. And then it's the videos class, and then the list function, and then there's some stuff that I got to throw in there. But here's the 2 YouTube videos, and you guys know this. You guys have all watched YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and you click on any old video, so we'll check on this guy right here. I hope you guys like metal. Up in the corner here, you'll notice that there's a video ID, and that's your video ID. So that's the UUID of any YouTube video. That's what I put in to our little script there. And then it executes that request. And I actually do it twice, so I can get rid of that because that's not necessary. And then at the end, I just print the response that I got back from that. So when we run this, boom, it says, please visit this URL to authorize this application. So this is the OAuth pass, right? So I hop over here, I paste that URL into a browser, I authenticate as the person that has those credentials. It says, hey, it wants to do these things. And I'm sure you guys have seen this 1,000 times when you've installed other third-party apps that link to things and that sort of thing. It says, hey, it wants to manage these things. These are what are known as the scopes. So you'll notice that I have 2 scopes right now inside of my authentication, and those equate to these things. Right, so I'm the one asking for them, and then I created an app that we showed in the credentials page, and I hit allow, and it's going to say, cool, go copy and paste this back into your application. So I copy it, paste it, boom, and voila, look at that. We get JSON back, and it says, hey, here's the video list response. That's the kind that came back, and then there's items, and there's a JSON list in here. And look at that. Here's the YouTube videos, and this one's got 0 views, and this one's got 1 view, and these are private videos, so that's why they're just little quick ones that I uploaded to validate, test that this all worked. But now I have the unique ID, and I have all the statistics about those. So we're going to use that a little bit later when we get into it. So I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood that and could see the kind of data we're getting back as we start to do our calls. All right. The other thing that I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to steal some code that I wrote for another application that I wrote, which is just the pub sub consumer, right? So when we start writing our new script, we'll make a new file here, and we'll save this, and we will call this app.py in our Iconik YouTube. And the first thing we're going to do is import all this stuff because we know we're going to need it again. And then I'm going to go basically steal from another bit of code that I wrote, which I do all the darn time, right? So go here, and I remember here, and then in this guy, I've got somewhere in here, I can't even remember where it is. Blah, 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 blah. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. There's a bunch of crap. Here we go. Process message. So this is our pub sub message receiver, basically. So what it does is it listens for a message. It tries to load the data that came from the pub sub, and then it dumps it out. Actually, I lied. This isn't it. This is what happens downstream. This is it. So what we have to do is, this is our main loop that we're going to use, and we're going to basically use the exact same main loop for our application here. And what this is saying is, excuse me, we're going to subscribe to our pub sub. We're going to tell it where it is. These variables we're going to set in a config file so that they can be changed to other subscribers. And then we're going to say, hey, let's grab a subscription. We're not going to get more than 5 messages at a time. And then we're going to loop through each of those messages, and process message was running the start of our application. So this actually runs the thing that I showed you guys a little bit earlier. So we're going to kind of copy both of these bits. And then if there's no messages, or if the acknowledgement, sorry, how's the best way to say this? When you get a pub sub message, you have to tell the pub sub topic that you got it if you're going to do something with it. So that's known as acking. So what we actually do now is say, hey, if the most recent pull we did for that actually has a message in it, and we successfully have run through all of them, now let's go tell the pub sub to not fill us in on any of those yet again, because otherwise we get duplicate messages over and over and over again. So when you receive a message from a pub sub, you want to say, hey, I got it. And acking is acknowledging, right? So it's letting it know that you got it, you're going to do something with it. And then it's on your local script at that point to manage what happened. So you're never going to get that message again. So if you want to do error trapping and that sort of things, you don't ever want to ack that message until you're kind of sure that you're done processing it. Or if you ack it early, then you want to make sure you store that message somewhere, so if you have to start over again, you can go reference it locally. Whether that's just in an object in your script, whether that's in a file, that's really up to you. So I'm going to copy this, go over to our little app here, and I'm going to steal our process, process underscore, our process message function as well. Because these both do, we're doing the exact same thing in our new script as this one. Up over here. And that's it. Boom. All right, cool. So now we've got all that going. And then the last thing we need to do is I do need to import the pub sub stuff too from Google. So I'm going to need from Google Cloud import pub sub. And at that up there. Hit save. And now, by rights, all we need to do is we can start running this script. The first thing we're going to do is actually set our project ID and subscription ID. Actually, real quick vote from the chat. Do you guys want to learn how to build config files into Python scripts right now? Because I can build a config file for this, or we can just hard code stuff in, which is generally bad practice, but takes less time when you're hacking away at things. So I'm cool with doing either. You guys tell me what you want to see. And if nobody responds, I'm just going to hack through it and be lazy. All right. So no responses. Cool. I know people are watching. So we're just going to hack through it. So I'm just going to grab these lines too. Just copy them over here real quick into our app. Nope, not that one. This one. Make a quick comment so I don't forget. This is our pub sub info. And we're not going to get them from a config file. We're literally just going to paste them in, right? So I'm going to go in here, and the project ID is just me. That's my project ID. And then the subscription ID we have over in our notes, wherever our notes were. Right here. Oh, I want the subscription ID of the topic. I think I want the subscription name. Yep. Cool. Oops. We can close this now. We got too many things open. There we go. App. Paste that in. Hit save. All right. So now that we've kind of copied and pasted this stuff in, we got two different things here. We've got our main loop for the application. This is kind of what runs. And we've got this that just processes the message. So you can see process message, receive message, and then go. And then in this one, what I did in the other one is I had a function called run transfer. And what that did is it took the JSON that was deformatted from our pub sub. So our pub sub sends us binary data. We turn that back into a JSON object inside of Iconik or inside of Python. And if we fail, we say, hey, we can't format that or whatever. And then I had a function called run transfer. So for right now, I'm actually going to get rid of that. And I'm going to make a new function that's just going to be called start. Well, actually, we'll use run transfer because we are going to be transferring stuff to YouTube. And then we are going to call this message that comes in. And right now, all we're going to do is do a print JSON dumps message, because we just want to make sure that this is working properly. And it probably won't on the first try, but hey, let's see what happens. So taking this up a level. Oh, okay. So everybody wants to see the config file. Okay, we will do that. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's try running this first, and if it fails horribly, we'll just hop back to the config file. I think there's a little bit more than a few second delay, so I think that's probably why you guys are hearing me say things, and then I don't see it for a little bit. So cool. So let's run our script. And it's probably not going to work, but we're going to try it anyway. Python app.py. No module called Google Cloud because I have not installed the Google Cloud pub sub thing. So let's, and I can't remember what the heck that's called, so let's be lazy again and go into my other package and look at the requirements that I created. And there it is, Google Cloud pub sub. So we're going to add that to our requirements, just so for the future we have it. And then the other thing I'm going to do is hop back into my shell and do pip install that. And this is installing the pub sub library into our existing virtual env. So it's doing all that stuff, downloading it, grabbing all the stuff it needs, compiling it, blah, 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 blah. All good. And then now let's try running it and see. Now we're probably just getting an actual error. Yeah, so I screwed something up. Invalid resource name given. Oh, that's why. You can see. So if you take a look at this, right, it says invalid resource name given. It's because I didn't need the project Szumlinski subscriptions in my variable because it automatically added it. Actually, all it wanted was actually in this case Iconik, the word Iconik. So I'm going to hop back into my app and go to my variable, which we will pull from a config file in a little bit here, and get rid of all this stuff. Let's save. Now run our code again, clear that up. And it's failing. Damn it. Oh, okay. Here's another thing we're going to teach you guys about today. Logging. Logging becomes really, really useful when you're doing things like this. And yes, we can just print stuff out to screen, but once you get into bigger and bigger applications, that's obviously kind of a pain in the butt, right? So we're going to implement some logging in this particular script as well. And we're going to do that to not only a file, but we're going to also do it right to screen so that we don't have to be tailing a file when it goes on. And the reason why this failed, just so to explain this even further, is it says, hey, name logging isn't defined. Well, I didn't import logging into my script yet, but I used it down here because I copied and pasted stuff from another script where I was using logging. So that's phase one, and I haven't set up my logs yet. So, and again, I'm just going to copy and paste this from my other app because, frankly, it works pretty well. So I'm going to go open that guy again. And you can see there is a line in here somewhere that I got that's called set up our logging. Yep, here we go. And we'll walk through this in our script here. So paste that in. So essentially, what this says is I'm going to do the configuring for logging, which is the tool that we create up here. I'm going to set the level to info. Well, we're working on dev right now, so I'm actually going to change this to debug so we can get more information out when we're doing it. And this is the format of the actual log file. And if you look in the docs for logging, this makes a little bit more sense, but it's basically saying, hey, what time, who was the user that did it, what was the log level, and then the actual log message at that point. And then the other thing I'm doing here is saying, hey, here's the file that it's at. So I'm going to make this one called Iconik YouTube. And so now I've got Iconik YouTube in the logs directory. The other thing here is I'm using this logging stream handler. What that's going to do is also output my logs to console at the same time. So it's not only writing the logs to a log file, it's also going to write them back to screen so I can see what's going on. And then if I deployed this into production, I could just leave that on and run it in a screen in the background, or I could just turn that off if I wanted to as well. You'll notice this is a list, right? I don't know if you guys quite got that, but you can see that there's a list there. So there's logging file handler and there's logging stream handler. If I just got rid of stream handler, it won't actually print it out to screen anymore. And then the other thing I got to do really quickly is go into my folder and make a logs folder. So let's do that. Where is my finder? There it is. Desktop. Code. Iconik YouTube. I'm just going to make a new folder, call it logs. Cool. So now that we've done all of that, now if we run this, in theory, should work. Boom. So what has happened, I don't know if you guys noticed this, is it's kind of cool. We've got our pub sub, and I have it in debug mode, so it's going to be really noisy here, but it says, hey, I made a call to that pub sub, and it got a message back, and then it actually, in my debug, you can see here, I've got the debug, it actually printed out the entire JSON that I got, and then it said could not process pub sub message, probably because something didn't work in my little logic tree there, but we'll come back and figure that out later. And now it's looking for more requests. So with our little, application running now at this point, I can hop back to Iconik right here and watch what happens when I go and grab an item and say send to YouTube now. And if I hop back over to my terminal really quickly, and if all is working, within a few seconds, we'll actually get another message. Here it says, hey, there's a new object that's available in that pub sub queue. And this basically is how long it takes to send that information to the cloud function, and then how long it takes the cloud function to send it over to the pub sub, and then we get it very shortly after that. So there we go. I just got all the information about that asset, and here's the asset ID right there. And if we want to, compare, let's take a look. It was this one, right? So that's asset ID 353.328F blah, blah, blah. And look at that, 353.328F blah, blah, blah. So cool. It's been under an hour, and now we have a custom action talking to a cloud function, talking to a pub sub, and now we can, with an on-prem piece of software or in any application deployment place you want that has an internet connection, start consuming messages from Iconik and doing stuff. Cool? I think that's kind of cool. That's fun. All right, so I'm going to exit out of this real quickly, clear the screen, because we don't need it running right now in the background. We're going to start doing some more. So let's rewind a little bit, and let's talk about config files. So there is a handy little library inside of, and I'm going to open another script here yet again to show you guys this, because it's a little faster than writing it. And again, stealing from your own code is never a bad idea, unless you write bad code like I do. Sometimes it's a bad idea. But you can see there's this thing called config parser, and that's a built-in module for Python. So I can take that, and I'm going to import that as well up top here. And then the other thing I can grab from over here, as you can see, there's a load rconfig file, and I'm going to grab that as well, just so that because we're going to do the same structure. We're going to put the files in the same places and everything along those lines. So what ends up happening here, let's close this guy and save this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new config parser, And basically, there's a predefined format for your config files inside of this config parser library. I'm going to read that config file, right? And here it is, it's just saying, hey, give me the path of the directory where the script is running right now. So app.py is running in a folder. Go into the config folder and config ini, find that file and read it. And then I log a line here that says, hey, I'm going to use this config file. So just so that we know in the logging that we're using that config file. That's not really a necessary line, but sometimes it's nice to know which config file you're using, just in case you accidentally forgot to type it in or something along those lines. So let's create a config file really quickly. So I'll go back into my folder here, code, YouTube. And since we're doing this so much, and since I keep opening, I got to remember to stop closing this damn window. Stop closing it. All right, so we're going to make a new folder, call it config, and then hop over to our code, make a new file, save it. Same folder, we're going to call it config.ini. And the way your config files work is they have sections and then variables. So to make a section, you just put it inside of brackets. So I'm going to make my first section Iconic, because we're going to put in our app ID and app key so that we can talk back to the Iconic API. And then I'm going to make a section called YouTube, because I'm going to store some of those informations. And then I'm going to make one called GCP, because we're going to store some of our config for our pub sub and those sorts of things in there. And then it's pretty darn easy to create new variables. So I can go and literally hop back to here and grab project ID and subscription ID. Put them in there. Now, what is important to note is that in these config files, you actually don't use Python code. So, and it's going to bring everything you read in here in as a string. So if you put integers in or you put booleans in or things like that, you're going to have to do some conversion from that to turn it into like actual objects inside Python. If you want to, do that. If you're just using strings, it's no big deal. They're coming in as strings anyway. But we're going to do that really quickly. And then if we hop back over here, instead of actually making this call now, which is just defining it, I'm going to say config.get, and then I'm going to put in the section, so GCP, and then the variable itself, project ID. And same thing goes for this. I'm going to do GCP and Iconic. Oh, and I should probably type in config.get. Cool. So now, instead of just calling out those variables right inside of our code, which is generally a bad idea because it's not very repurposable if we have to go into the code every time we want to change variables, we can do this. And we could do, again, anything can be stored in a config file. So if I want to allow people to rename their config, not the config file itself, obviously, that would be an infinite loop of stupidity, but like the logging file, if I wanted to make it go somewhere else or be able to redirect it, I could make this a variable up here that I get from the config file, and then I could even test to see if it exists. If it doesn't exist, I can default back to something else, right? So there's some logic that we can do around the config file there. So now we've done this. In theory, if I've done this right, and we rerun our script, I screwed up. So what did I do wrong? No option Iconic in section GCP. Is that correct? Oh, I'm stupid. I'm sure you guys see what I did. It's not Iconic. It's subscription ID. The actual variable is Iconic, right? But the subscription ID is what I wanted to get. So let's do this again. Boom. And we're lucky. It's trying to connect. It's thinking. Actually, I think we should be good. And if we go back to Iconic really quickly and send to YouTube, boom, there's our info. This error is probably because something will debug this guy a little error, but that's my error that I said. Oh, okay, so we got an error up above, right? No, we don't. We're good. All good. So I'm going to exit out of my script. That's what happens when you don't clear your screen between running things. All right, so now we've successfully created a config file, and this works with any Python script, right? As long as you import config parser, and then you load in a few lines to talk about what that config parser is, then you can get these config gets at any time. And I believe you can actually update it from your application as well. So if you have some degree of interactivity, you can do a config put, I think, and overwrite options and things along those lines too. But for the sake of what we're doing here, we're just going to be doing gets. All right, so let's see. Let's go back to our kind of high-level overview and see where we're at. So get the asset ID from the queue. Okay, so we got to build a function that gets our asset ID or decodes that. So let's go back to our app here, and we're kind of doing that already, right? Let's see. Let's take a look at our process message here and clean up that could not process thing from earlier. So we're saying try to do this stuff. If that runs true, else return it. So why am I not able to do that? So something's failing in run transfer. So let's do a little logging.debug, and whoops, in our debug logging here, let's actually try to dump out our JSON right inside the function to make sure we're actually getting what we're expecting to get at that point. Run our app again. Are we running in debug mode? Let me double check that. Yeah, logging debug, and let's see if our, let's make sure while we're at it too, ls logs. Yep, our log's there, and if we logs, Iconic. Yep, so we're seeing all that. Cool. All right. So let's run our app again, and then let's send something back to it real quickly. Send to YouTube. Run back to our script. All right, so that's just a print function, not a logging function. So that's strange. We're getting the right stuff out. Hi, Harrison is cool. So, all right, so let's take a look at where we're at here. Back to my code. Take a look here. So so we receive the message. Now, why am I not getting that info in my log? So something's up already, right? So let's log a little more info here. So logging.debug, project ID, and logging.debug, subscription ID. And let's just make sure that our config file, when we fire up our script, is actually getting that stuff properly. Oh, that's funny. Make a call to logging before I actually set up logging. Right? So that's probably a problem. So there's also the wonderful world of when you're starting up scripts, you probably don't want to put information into your script that requires something that doesn't happen until later in your script, because it won't work right. So there we go. Let's go back and try this again. There we go. Now we have proper logging again, and that's coming out properly. That's all good. Cool. And let's shoot this over. Take a look. Okay, could not process message. This is the debug of the message itself. All right. let's take a look really quickly here and get a feel for why that's happening, because that's a little strange. So let's say that's all good. So returns true on transfer. Oh, that's why. So, let's see. So what ends up happening here in this particular situation is that my oh crap. Hopefully everybody's still seeing this. My stream manager just said that I'm disconnected. Let's take a look and see. Nope, we're still up. Okay, cool. It's not me, it's you. So what I didn't do is return a status on this function. So right here, I said if run transfer, right? Well, if run transfer, that little bit of logic right there expects run transfer to return true. So it worked, but it didn't return true. And that's why we were getting our could not process pub sub message. So now I can actually pop back out, clear, take a look at what's going on. Let's send our command in again. Boom, and send. All right, hop back over. And look at that. No more debug errors about not being able to transfer. That was my fault. Okay, so it was telling me what it was doing, and I paid attention to it and figured it out. Hooray. Okay, so now that we got all of that working, I do feel like there was something else that everybody wanted to see and that I've forgotten about other than the config files. Was there something else we were going to talk about? Oh, logging. We talked about logging. So we've got that covered as well. So we got logging, we got our config file, and we have done all that. Okay, so now what we want to do is we've got our asset ID from the queue, right? If we take a look at the response that comes in, we've got all the assets that come in inside this asset IDs, right? So we can loop through that message for all the asset IDs that get brought back and process against them. But what we're going to want to do is look up the original file where that lives so that we can grab that file and download it. And we can do this either with the original itself or we can do it with the proxy. It's going to be relatively similar as far as the function goes, but we're going to use Iconik to do this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some info to our config file. So I'm going to go up to Iconik here and I'm going to say app ID equals and secret equals. And then we're going to go grab those from Iconik real quickly. So let's close that down. Let's close some windows that we don't need open here real quickly too. Make life a little easier on ourselves. Boom. We don't need the pub sub open anymore because that's working. Okay, back into Iconik. And go to settings and app key or app tokens, and then I'm going to grab my YouTube send one. Grab that. Go to my config file. That's the app ID. Secret I saved earlier. Boom. Save. Back. All right. So now we've got an app ID and secret for Iconik. That means we can start making calls to our Iconik API to start getting stuff back. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually get that information out of our config file now. So I'm going to say app ID equals config.get Iconik, comma, app ID, and then secret or Iconik secret equals config.get Iconik secret. And then I'm going to also make little global headers so that I don't have to keep sending this back and forth again. So I'm going to go here, and it's going to be app ID, I think it's camel case. I always forget if it's camel case or not. App ID, and then I'm going to put in my app ID, and then auth secret. This might not be right. I'm going to look this up really quick because I always forget what the actual header is because I always do this shortcut and then I forget what it is for the next time I'm doing things. So I'll take a look at something I know is working and that I've got this saved, this laziness shortcut saved in. All right, so right here, auth token there. And close that. Did I do that? Auth token. That's why. Token and app ID is capitalized. All right, cool. Boom. So now I've got headers that I can just reuse when I'm doing things. The other thing is I always use requests to talk to Iconic. So I'm going to import requests. That's our library that we used all on the last episode to do all of our Iconic API work because it's super clean and easy. And then the other thing I got to do is let's add that to our requirements doc again because that is not a default library inside Python, which should be, but hey, I'm not going to complain because it's pretty awesome. And then last but not least, we got to install it really quickly. So quit our script, clear it out, pip install requests. Oh, it's already installed. I already installed it in this virtual env, so we're good. So now we can start to get information about our asset. So first and foremost, when we take a look at this run transfer function is where things kind of start. And this is going to be the main logic loop that we're going to use now for sending everything to YouTube. This is going to be the thing that looks at our message, does all the loops, runs all our functions, that sort of thing. So what I'm actually going to do in this case is I'm going to make a new function, and I'm going to call this function get original file location, or URL. We'll say URL because we're going to download it, right? And then I'm going to pass it an asset ID. And what we're going to do is do a r equals requests dot get, and we're going to put, I'm going to make another little shortcut up here. Actually, we'll put this in the config file because this is handy too. So underneath Iconic, we're going to put API URL. And the reason I'm putting this in the config file is 99.9% of the time, you're never, ever going to change this. But if you are running Iconic in an enterprise environment or a single tenant environment, you're not going to be talking to app.iconic.io. You're going to be talking to something else. So in this case, we don't want to do that. So I'm going to put in our standard location, app.iconic.io/API. And then I'm going to hop back into here and do Iconic URL equals config.get Iconic API URL. That's what I called it, right? Yep, cool. And I'm also going to pop that up here and move this down a couple lines just so that we can see that that's something that's set outside of our config file. So I'm going to do a request.get Iconic URL plus, and now I got to go look up how we do this. So let's pop out our good old Iconic dev docs and go to APIs and go to reference guide and go to files. And then what we're going to do is do a get on the asset IDs files. So we'll try this out really quickly with the one we've been working on here. So let's go search. And this guy right here. And I'm going to grab that asset ID just so I can see what my response is from the API. Make sure that I'm getting the right information back that I'm actually looking for here. Run it. It says, cool. Yeah, we get two objects back that are the files, and we get the location of those storage IDs, everything along those lines. So this is where we're going to start with this. What we could probably do here too is we could probably set up a smart list so that we're not going to try to get files from storages that we don't want to work with. So maybe a blacklist of storages. Maybe you've got stuff on a more expensive tier of storage and you don't want this tool pulling from that tier of storage because it costs a whole heck of a lot to egress or something along those lines. And the other thing we can theoretically do is also build a mapping to our ISG. So if the file is already local and visible to the script runner, we could just upload it there too. I think for right now, we're just going to look at cloud storages, and then we can, if we got time, we got time. We can come back to that though. All right. So let's get this information. So let's hop back over to our script and say Iconik get, and we're going to do the API files /files /v1 assets and then plus asset ID and plus /files /. Okay. So that's going to run the API call we just ran here. And it's going to get that original file. This is the first part of the process here. It's going to get the original file. And I'm going to do if r.status code, I can't remember, status code equals, what's it supposed to equal? Let's go take a look. Success on this API call is a 200. So basically what I'm doing here is saying, hey, when this particular function runs, this guy right here, this line, if the status code comes back successful, let's do stuff. Else, I'm just going to return false for right now. And if I want to, I can do logging.debug, and then I can do, we'll just say request error :/ and then I'm going to do r.text, which is basically the raw text that comes back from that response. So if we get anything other than a 200, I'm going to prop the text out into my logging. Now, generally speaking, what's going to happen here, if you're doing this correctly, you're going to look at actually all the status codes that can come back from an API call. So you can see it came back 200, but we say we're going to return a 200, a 401, and a 404. You probably want to build logic around all of those to make it really bulletproof, just so that you can inform, the application and the logs if you get something different back. And then you're going to want an exception if it's not a 200, 401, or 404 that you can just raw dump. I'm skipping that process right now because I'm, again, being lazy and fast. So I'm just going to trap for the 200 at this point. So if we get that back properly, I'm going to say files equals r.json, which is basically this bit of data, right? And actually, I kind of don't care about anything above and beyond the actual objects that come back in that case. So I could actually say files equals r.json objects, because that's really what I care about. And that's going to bring back a list now. So, and then from there, now we can start doing our next thing. So let's take a look at what that response actually gave us, right? So it said, hey, here are the 2 files associated with that, and we get to make the decision on which one we want to use. Now, actually, the more I think about this, it seems to make more sense to use the one that is locally available if it is locally available first, right? So in this particular case, we can see that one of these is local and one of them is remote. And the way I kind of know that, well, there's 2 ways I can know that. One, I can just look at the asset and I can see one's on an ISG, and the other is I can look at the Backblaze storage here and see it's on Backblaze. But in the API response itself here, you can see that it actually gives us the storage ID back. And what we can do is look up that storage ID and see what type of storage it is, and then determine where we should start, right? So let's do that next and try to figure out where this actual file, the most logical place to get this file is. So what I'm going to do is hop back in, and I'm going to say for storages, or storage in files, which is basically going to loop through all the items in files and give me back the actual object as storage. And now I'm going to run another API call to look up the storage and see what type of storage it is. So I'm going to say I'm going to use S as this request because I don't necessarily want to throw out the info from this one and overwrite it yet, and we're still in scope. So I'm going to say S equals requests.get Iconic URL. Oh, I noticed one other thing I missed earlier. I'm going to do this really quickly is put in headers equals Iconic headers. Because Iconic headers. Okay. Because if I didn't do that, guess what was going to happen? It was not going to ever run this. It's going to fail. I'm not going to get my 200. I'm going to get the 401, that sort of thing, because we never authenticated to it because we didn't put our app token and ID in there. So, okay, cool. So now I'm going to say request get plus, and now we want to look at, go back to our API browser. And this time we're going to be actually looking at storages, right? Which is still in the files section. So no, it's not in files. It is in settings. That was in files. So many APIs, collections, export locations, files, formats. There we go, storages. So we're going to get storages on the actual storage ID here, right? Because what we want to get back is what kind of storage is this on, and should we try to check and see if it lives locally. So let's hop back to our response that we got from our other API, which I probably already closed. Assets it's still there, and I just closed it. Yeah, asset ID files there. So here's our response that we got back. I'm going to copy this storage ID really quickly and roll down to our other one that we got open and literally just paste it in, say execute. And you can see this gives me back a 200 as well, and then it gives me all the information about the storage, right? So in this case, I can see that it's method file, the name is this, and the purpose is files, right? So method file inside the scope of Iconic means it's always an ISG, right? Now, if we go up to our other item here, so I grabbed the first one. Let's grab our storage ID from the second one, right? So let's say, where's storage ID? Storage ID here. And I throw that into the same query. Boom. Now you'll see that this one's backblazed. So it says method is B2, name is B2 storage. Purpose is still files, but method changes, right? So if you see method file, you know it's an ISG. If you see method anything else, it tells you exactly what it is at that point. Okay, so next up, we're going to write that into our code. So we're going to do Iconic URL plus files v1 storages plus storage ID. Well, actually this is for file in files, which is not a good, this file in files. I think there's a better naming convention because I'm not actually talking about storages in this loop. I'm actually talking about the files, and I'm getting the storage ID at this point. And I'm pretty sure that is storage ID. Let's double check my math here really quickly. So if we go back and look at our response, and we get back objects, and inside of that we get back storage ID. The other thing we can do here, and maybe it makes sense to do this, is decide which format we want to send. The format ID itself is going to be original, proxy, or any custom formats that you've defined when you're, adding stuff to the Iconic system, right? So you can, inside of Iconic, we by default always create these original and proxies, but you can create as many different types of formats as you like within here. And that means that, functionally, you can make something that comes out of a Vantage workflow that's your pre-made already ready to go YouTube upload or something along those lines that you're still tracking and storing, and you can use that as an upload instead. So maybe it makes sense for us to check the actual format ID and make sure it's the right format ID as well. So first we'll check the format ID, because that'll make our list a little bit shorter. So to do that, let's hop back over to our API, and we're going to look at asset ID, or assets and formats. Formats, right? So on that same asset ID, one we've been working on here. And this is a little confusing, but this is how the data model works, right? So we get back the formats itself, and then inside here, you can see there's going to be a format called original, right? Where is it? There. So this is in the response that comes back from that formats get. Down at the bottom, there is a name, original, and that's the only format we actually care about. And that format also has an ID, right? So that's the format ID, and we're going to compare those two. And let's copy and paste this really quickly just so you guys can see it. So that's the format ID that I got from the formats call. And if I scroll up to my files call up here, here's the objects that it came back, and the one that was in Backblaze, let's see, where is it? There's a format ID, and I copy and paste that one and take a look. Notice that those are the exact same strings at that point. So you can look up the format IDs and compare them at that point to your objects first, and then if the format is correct, then you can go further. Otherwise, you can just not worry about it. So what we're going to do now is I'm in here looking at the storages. Let's look at the formats first. So f equals requests.get Iconik URL plus files v1 formats plus asset ID plus slash, right? And headers equals Iconik headers. Cool. So now, if f.status code equals 200, pretty sure that's a 200. Let's double check that. That's our files call. 99% of the time when you're doing a get, it's a 200 as a successful response call. When you're doing puts and stuff, sometimes it's a 201, 202. All right, so hop back to our code, equals 200. So format list equals f.json. So now we've got a list of all of our formats, and that list of all that formats is in the exact same format that we've got here. So it's objects, and then it's got a list of objects. So the objects are actually what we care about. Let's actually skip right to that in our code. So we'll say this, objects. All right. And then we'll do an else here and say, we can do our exact same debug here. This time it's f.text. And return false. That just exits our function when we run into an error, and tells the error above it, or the function above it, not to return true, or not to rate success, basically. All right, so now we got all that stuff done. We've got our list of formats now, and what we're going to do now is hop out, and we're going to compare the results we get here in our storages request to, or in our original objects request, to the formats that are originals, right? So what we want to do is inside this formats list, we want to loop through it, and let's take a look at what the actual data is that comes out of here, right? Let's copy this into a new file just so it's easier to collapse things to. This is a pretty big chunk of data. New one, save, and we will say formats.json. All right. So we can see if we take a look, I'm going to collapse components really quickly, and I'm going to collapse metadata really quickly because that shows us actually the meat of what we care about. We want to look for the name being original against all of those objects. And you can see in this case, it is a list, but there is only one object in here. If I collapse that, you can see it's just one right now. If there are multiple, we can loop through and see which one is the right name that we have at that point. So we're looking for the right file types first. And with that format, we now have our format ID that we can compare to our files list, right? Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about this, that's way convoluted. There's a smarter way to do this. When we get our format itself, you'll actually notice we get the storage method and all that sort of thing. But we get the asset ID at that point and the format ID, and then I can get the file based on the format at that point. So we can go take a look at the components, and inside here we can see type video, that sort of thing. But somewhere in this formats data set, we look at this. Let's collapse some of this. So that, yeah. All right, so the format ID's there, and then I can go against this format ID, I think, and get the, I can validate whether it's original or not, and then I can get the file directly from there, I believe, from the asset. Let me think about this for a second. So, so we have the ability to get, we have the asset ID already. So that's the information we have before we started this entire logic tree. And what we're looking for is to validate the right format type and then get the file for the format type. So what we're going to do is get the format first and look for original, or all the originals, so we can get the format IDs. And this is the, okay, this is the smarter way we're going to do this. So let's kind of block this out as a quick diagram. So what we're going to do is we have our asset ID, right? And that's going to let us get formats. And then we can loop through formats, look for original only. And that might return nothing or one or multiple. So if none, exit, right? Because we don't have a file, we don't have an original format to work with. If one, return. So we're going to build a function that just gets this first, that returns it. And then if multiple, then we've got to decide which one's the most efficient one we want to do, which we can make another function down here that does that. So if multiple, figure out storage priority or something along those lines. So let's hop back into our code really quickly and fix what I did here. So first thing we're going to do is we get the asset ID. We're actually not going to get the files. We're going to get the formats first, right? And then we're going to pass that in. And then we're going to say for this format in, so formats equals that in formats. And now what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of all this temporarily. It was just unnecessary code that I wrote. We're going to say if this format, and it is what? I think it's just name, right? Well, I already have that open, right? So where's my formats.json? If this format name is original, right? So if this format name is original, what we'll probably do, what we should do is probably just add these to a list so we can process over it. So first thing I'm going to do is make original formats, and it's just going to be an empty list that has nothing in it. And then I'm going to do original formats, append this format ID. Because that's going to basically get the format ID. If we take a look at our format again, you can see that it has a unique ID. That's what we compared to the files list. So we'll have essentially a list of formats that that come back from this that are original, and then we can go take a look and see all the storages that those originals are on, and then make our decision based on that. So if this format equals original, do that. And then we will say if len of original formats is 0, return true, but we're going to logging.info no, actually we're going to return false because we don't find any files there. No original formats found. Okay. So what this little function now does is it gets the first bit of it, finds all of our formats, checks to make sure that they're originals, and builds a list. Okay, so now I have a list that says, now let's hop out a layer and say r equals requests.get. And I'm overwriting the response from this because we don't need it anymore. We've done all of our logic for that first response, and we're not going to come back to it. Iconic URL plus files v1 assets plus asset ID plus files. So this time we're going to get the files on this. All right. And then if our status code equals 200, we're going to start doing our logic on this. And we're going to say files is equal to r.json objects again. And if we go take a look back just to verify this, if we take a look at our actual files response, right? So this is our files response. We can see that it's objects, and it's yet again a list of all of the files. Now is where we do our comparison, right? So now we've got a list of all of those files. Actually, and we'll do our else here just to all right. We actually already have it here. There, okay. Files equals, now I got my file list. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to say for this file in files, so I'm going to loop through all of those files, if this file, and then what's the actual name of it? I think it's, whoops, let's go take a look at our response now. I think it's format ID, right? So if this file format ID, so we can see that there's the format ID right there. If this file format ID is, or in, is in? I think it's in original formats, right? So we're basically comparing the two lists. And basically filtering out all the files that are not actually originals. So, and then we're going to create a new empty list up here again, and that empty list is going to be original files, because we're going to get the IDs of the files, not the formats. So in original formats, we're going to do original files append, which means we're just adding to that list this file format ID. Okay, so now we've got a list of files that we know, we've got file IDs now that we know are correct for what we want to do. And then, all right, so that's all good. And then we'll do another if statement here, which is if len original files equals 0, logging info, no files found for original formats for asset plus asset ID. Cool. And return false. All right, so we've written a lot of code and we haven't really tested it in a little bit, but I think this is all probably going to work. I'm feeling pretty confident about it, so let's dive one little step deeper and let's actually try to get our URLs out of these files. And then we can take a little bit of a break and come back in a few minutes. So let's comment this out a little bit too, just so it makes a little bit more sense. So the first thing we're going to do is get all our formats. The next thing we're doing is this little block is get only original formats from list of all. And then this little block is get only files that are original formats from above list. And then the last thing we need to do now is, okay, now we've got a list of original files. We got to loop through those files and see what storages they're on and then make some determinations, right? So we know that all of these are good. And what we're going to have to do is either set some priority or set only of specific storage that we want to upload from so that we can properly get the right URL. So let's see how do we want to do this. So we're going to say for let's see, what's a good variable to call this? For original file in original files, right? So this is going to go through each one of those, and I just have a list of IDs. I can now go get the actual file information specifically about that file, because now I have the asset ID and I have the file ID. So I'm going to do a r equals requests dot get Iconik URL plus slash files. Oh, I found a typo there. Files v1 assets and plus asset ID plus files and then plus original file. So that's going to get us the actual original file information. And then we'll do our good old error trap here. So far status code equals 200. Let's do some stuff. Oh, and we got to throw our headers at the end of this so we can authenticate. Headers equals Iconik headers. Cool. All right. So if status code equals 200 for that, let's go take a look and see what happens here. So we've got our file ID now. So here's an ID for an actual file. Let's actually get the response on that specific file. So if we go take a look and look a little bit further, there's a get on files and then get the information about the specific file ID. And we also need to grab the asset ID here too. So let's say asset ID. Hit execute. All right. So this gives us all of the information about that specific file and which storage it's on, right? Actually, we already have this, believe it or not, from our list above because that was in all files. We just know that the files, so we already filtered that list. So maybe we don't need to go this far. Maybe we just need to get, see, do we need to get the file sets now? Let's see. Yeah, the file set ID is what I need to get. So we have that. Let's go to asset ID and then file sets. Should be down here. No, it's above. File sets and get. Try it out. File set ID and then our asset ID that I copied and pasted in. Hit go. And now we can see, let's see, so that's the name of it, and then our storage ID and our base directory and everything along those lines. So we have all the information we need now to actually put together. Actually, we might even have that from the other call now that I'm thinking about it, because files are below file sets, right? So if we take a look at this, yeah, we've got the full directory path, and we've got the actual original name, and then we've got the ID of the file itself. So that should all be good for what we need to do. So let's just make sure all of our code we've written so far before we go into a little break works. So we're just going to do print r.json. Actually, we'll do a JSON dump, so it's pretty. JSON dumps indent 4, just so it's pretty, and then this goes inside brackets, goes there, does that. All right, and let's just run our code really quickly. I bet something screwed up. Okay, line 66. I did something wrong. Let's say if else. Oh, this is on the wrong level. Boom. Do I even need to do this? Why is this still here? Yeah, I think this is something that was left over that I forgot to delete. Let's try to run this again. All right, there we go. We're up and running. And we can go back to our asset and say, okay, let us send to YouTube. And now, we should, within a few seconds here, get a response. And now we can see this was our request output that we just did. Let's see, where's our actual print statement in our code here? What I probably should have done in that print statement is said, this is your data. There. Just so it's a little easier to see. Let's restart our launcher, do it again. And send to YouTube. All right, not back. Wait a few seconds, or did I already get it? Nope, I haven't gotten it yet. Huh. All right, well, we're going to take a little bit of a break. It's been almost 2 hours that we've been going straight. I'm going to take a little bit, like 5-6 minute break, play some tunes, and we'll be back shortly. And we're going to keep going with this until we get it. So thanks, everyone, for joining. And we're not done by any means. Just hang on for a little bit longer, and we'll come back in a little bit. All right, I am back. I had to get some food. Hadn't eaten in a while, and I brought a friend with me. So now I'm not alone either. Well, I was never alone, guys. You were here the whole time, but now you get to watch me eat while I code. All right, so back at it. So if we take a look, what I actually want to do is I'm going to break out some of the little functions that we just wrote and run them by hand really quickly, just to make sure that we're getting the right responses back, because I did write quite a bit of stuff and we didn't really test it. So what I'm going to do, that's why it doesn't work. I never called the function, right? So let's, this is all one big function, and really what it should have done is I should have done a return of the data, right? Or return of the JSON dumps of the data, right? That's my fault. We never called the function that we just wrote this whole thing. So that's what happens when you don't eat for a while and you sit down. So when we're in our run transfer here, what I actually want to do is say, all right, let's get our original file, URL, just so we can see where we are along these lines. And then it's going to be message, and then it's going to be ID. I think it's ID. Let's go take a look at our example JSON file that we grabbed earlier, right? Oh, so it's going to be 4 asset IDs in the message, right? So let's see. Let's hop back to our app. So 4 asset ID in message asset IDs. Asset ID. Cool. Now, if we run our little script, let's kill it and restart it, and hop over to Iconik and do this really quickly and say send to YouTube and hop back over. Okay, what did I do wrong? So I broke something. Object type boolean has no length. All right, I know what that means, but line 62. Let's go see what did I do wrong here. Line 62. If len original formats equals this. That's strange, because it is a list. It's not a boolean. Do I? Huh. Okay. Why'd that happen? Original formats. This format and format. So this format name equals original. Logging.info. Found original format for format ID plus this format ID. Okay, and oh, yeah, no, that's right. 0. What was my error here? On line 62, get original file URL if len original formats equals 0. Object type original formats. Do I do something oh, no, that's right. This format equals original. Probably doing something dumb here, but let's try it with my logging and see if I get a little bit more info. Okay, killed it again. Exact same thing, but did I get my info? Found original format for this. Okay, so what the heck? What am I doing wrong here? Original formats append this format ID. That makes it into a list. Oh, that's why. See, it's always something silly. I was doing a loop here, and then I checked the length of the output of that loop inside the loop, which would never work, right? So I had to bounce it outside the loop. So let's do this again. Now we should be good. No, I've still screwed something up. Right, so if len original formats is that. Here's what I want to do. Logging.info original format list plus original formats dot join dot join comma, I think. Gotta look up the join syntax. Basically join, let's see, Python, join, I can never remember where it goes, but it takes a list and turns it into a string, right? So if I've got 5 different things in a list and I want them to just be, it's dot join in the interval. Okay, cool, so that's great. That is correct. And go back here, save it, run it, send something to it. There. List object has no attribute join. Yes, it does. It's literally what it's there for. That is so weird. I'm really confused by that one. Do I change the type somewhere here? I don't. I just put format ID in. And we do say that, right? So original format ID found, which means that this line is running. This I'm assuming is running as well, because this line's running. This is pretty easy. And then that's the entire loop, right? And then it's failing here. Okay, so let's just get rid of that. Oh, I'm stupid. Okay, guys, real quick one here. I was checking for the length of original formats. I put the parentheses outside the place where I wanted to check the length. So what I was looking for, original formats equals 0 is what I was passing to length. Well, length doesn't want that. It wants the list. And then I can check to see if it's 0. So now go here and run that and hop back, and we get no crash this time. Oh, we did get a crash, damn it. But it's a different crash. It's a new crash. So we found that, say, in line 76, key error format ID, which means that it couldn't find the format ID for that. So 76 for this file and files, logging.debug JSON dumps this file. I just want to see what the heck the file is. Maybe I'm passing the wrong information to it, and that's why it's failing. So I just added a debugger line. Okay, it sent it again. That's great. Did I save it yet? Yeah, I did. So now I should have at least gotten... Okay. It's not in component. Okay, so I got that. These are all the components. ID is online, storage name is original. Format ID. Ooh, there's no format ID in this? Should be. There isn't. That's weird, right? Because is it a layer above that? No. Because that's just the object itself. So let's take a look at this again and see if I'm... Oh, actually, let's search for format. There really isn't a format ID when I do that call. So I screwed up in my implementation here. All right, so let's do this again. So asset ID, and let's just look at the data set that comes back when I get formats on it. So not files, formats, down below. Formats. Okay, so run this call again. Asset ID, objects, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, again, finding my own mistakes. What did I make the call to? I made the call to the formats, and I asked for the formats back. There is no format ID. There's just an ID. That is the format ID because that's what I was asking for, right? So the actual ID for the top level object here, this ID is the format ID, which is why when I asked for this file format ID, I don't want that. I want the ID itself. So now let's run this again. And our message is probably still in there. Okay, cool. So we got a little further this time. Key error format IDs. I did it. I probably did it twice somewhere. Yep. This file. Format ID. Wait, let's take a look at that. Before I jump to conclusions here. Line 78. Line 78. Okay, so for this file in files, this file ID in original formats. Okay. So let's logging.debug. Let's throw in our this file indent for, because that's, we crash right after that. So if we run this again, it's going to crash again, but at least I'm going to know what the data set is that's getting passed, right? So this is what gets passed right before it dies. Oh, no, I did something else stupid here now. If this file in original formats. For this file, okay. I do it right above. So let's actually move this down here. Okay, so let's take a look here. So this is the let's make sure I'm making the right call. Oh, I never make the call. I deleted that line earlier. I remember doing that. Man, full of mistakes today, guys. I forgot to get the stupid files first, so I'm using R again, which I probably shouldn't have done. You can see I ran the request, and then I accidentally deleted this because I wasn't smart and I didn't comment and say get the files for this asset to compare. All right, now things are going to work a little differently. Okay, so this time that all worked. Now let's see. Oh, and same I typoed twice with my length comparison because I copied and pasted bad stuff earlier. So where was that one? If length there, this goes here. This gets rid of it, and run this one more time. Look at that, no crashing anymore. So now we've got some information out of the system. We've acted, all that sort of stuff, right? So let's see. That's the new message. That's a new message. So we're good. And I think somewhere in there we have this. All right, what was our final outcome? Print, this is your data. Let's go find that. No? Okay, so didn't find any data. Say, okay. We didn't find any original assets. Okay. Well, either way, if we find the original file in original files. Okay, so now we're going to have for each file. Got that. Okay, so now for this file in no. Original file is the file ID that we are getting, which is going to give us the storage ID, but it's also going to give us the path to that particular item. And then we got to look up how to grab that actual file. All right, so. Whew. All right. Let's take a look here. So we got to get a URL, right? So URL, I can't remember. Yeah, generate signed URL. True. So this is the, if I re-execute this now, what you're going to see in the response, and it takes a little bit longer, but I actually get the URL of the download location if it is on a cloud storage. And I should have been sending that as a parameter when I was doing that, because then I can get that URL back to do my download, and that's a temporary signed URL that I need to do. All the data sets up to this haven't had that because I haven't been passing that parameter. Now, the other thing is, do we want to worry about that? So we could check to see if the URL is in that, and then grab it, transfer it, and then retransfer it. I think for right now, we're just going to use the, because we've been going for 2 hours right now, and there's a lot still left to do, I am going to just download it from wherever the source location is to a temporary location, and then we're going to re-upload it, because we basically have all the logic in place now to do that. So what we're going to do is go back into our code real quickly. Well, let's actually grab this. So the parameter we want is generate signed URL true. Okay, and if we take a look at this, you can see it's generate signed URL true in the actual URL. We're going to add that as a parameter to our files call when we actually make our files call. So let's hop back here. Original files. Okay. So when we do our request for the files itself, we're going to add in params, and the params are going to be equal to, whoops, copied the wrong thing there. Generate signed URL, and it's going to be true. Okay, and what that's going to do is in our data set now, when we get back our objects, we're going to actually get the URL as well as part of that. So if this file ID in original formats, original file append this file format ID, what I'm actually going to do this time is I'm going to check to see if it has a signed URL. If it does have a signed URL, then we can use that right away as our place to grab the file so that we can start uploading it with YouTube. So I'm going to, instead of passing it back as a list of files, I'm going to do a list of dicts. So I'm going to say format. Wait, make sure I'm doing this in the right place. I think I'm doing it in the wrong place. All right, so get only the files original. Okay, files append, length files. Okay, no original file. Okay, files, original file. Yeah, that's why I'm in the wrong place. This is where I want it. And it's important, too, to note that this does take more time for the API to run. So if you have a longer list of files, you probably don't want that to be generate signed URL to be true unless you're planning to use it to get download links from your output. Okay, so we got all that now. And now we're going to see, okay, so if, what is it actually? I think it's just URL, right? Is the... Yeah. Yep. URL. If, let's see, URL can't remember how to check a key if a key exists. Check if key in dict Python. So I did have it right. Okay. So if URL in r.json objects, I'm pretty sure this brings back an objects list. Let's double check that because we're going on the individual file, right? So files, we ran this earlier, file ID, yeah, files, file ID. No, it does not. So I just have to check inside the JSON it returns, not inside an object list. So if we have URL in there, return r.json URL. And what we're doing now is what we said all the way up at the top here, get original file URL. So I'm going to return that back so the function that runs it is good. Also, otherwise, logging.info could not find download URL for original. Skipping. And return false. All right. So now that we've done all of that, what we should be able to do now is down in our run transfer, we should be able to just do print this, and that should give us our URL for this particular item if everything worked properly. So let's see, and let's temporarily kick us back into info level debugging so it's a little easier to see what's going on here because we got a bunch of stuff making a bunch of noise. All right, so let's hop over and go here and do YouTube. No files found for original formats, found original format ID. So I did something wrong here, obviously, because it's telling me my logic's bad because it returned false, and it said no files found for original formats for that asset. So where's my logic bad? So I'm gonna drag that up onto my other screen to make it a little easier to see for me. And let's say all right, so if len equals 0, in original, this file ID. Okay. So we get all of our formats. We put them into a list called original formats. This format ID, and that returns. Then we get all of our files. We look at original files, which is a list. But we don't want this file ID, we want this file format ID, which is exactly, I had those backwards earlier. So pretty simple mistake to make. Let's run our app again. And if I'm correct, there we go. So found original format, I did something stupid now. So name request is not defined. Oh. Let's take a look at that again. So, because I forgot an S, typoed. Requests. Sometimes letting autocomplete do its thing is smart, because then you can't make typos. Okay, there it goes. Found original format, but it returned false. Okay, so it found the original format. So let's turn on our debugging real quick just so we can see why. Because now we're exiting cleanly. We got good info, but we don't exactly know why our logic's bad. Back over here, send it. Okay. So we got in our files, assets, files, and then the asset ID is that, format ID is that, asset is that, format ID is that. So that's good. Why are we not? Do we not? Oh, we didn't get our URLs for some reason. Did I have the wrong call? That's why, because we're looking for that URL key in this particular call. Let's run that by hand over here. All right, so this is it, asset files, file ID. Ah, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, it's generate signed post URL for the individual call, not generate signed URL. So, no, that's an upload URL though. So for download URLs, I can't get it by the individual file. That seems not right, but maybe that is correct. Maybe I don't need to even go into the individual file. Maybe I just work with the original list. Okay. Let's take a look at this again. If we don't get that at all, and we have for this file and files, we have if there's a this file format ID there. Okay. So let's think about this real quick. All right. I have got that's okay. My Stream Manager keeps disconnecting too. It's kind of odd. I don't know if it's just a Twitch problem or what. It looks like we're still live, but keeps losing my chat, guys. I apologize. So if you have been chatting, I probably haven't seen it because it was disconnected on me. Let's see. So we got. Let's trace this back a little bit. So we got all our formats, we got all our files, and if I put this parameter up in our files get up here, and I will have the asset IDs here. So original files, blah. So we're checking that for original file in original files. So what I want to do, I think here is because I have the list, I don't need to run this new call down here and look up each individual file. I already actually have that the information I care about up here. So this is an unnecessary API call at this point. So what we're going to do instead is, instead of just format or appending the format ID itself to original files, we're just going to append this file, which means that we get a list of only the files that are original formats at this point. And then for original file in original files, which is up here, I can say if URL in original file. So that's because we have the entire data set now of that JSON inside of that list as an object. And I do my logic to kind of get all of that there, but I'll have the URL inside that file. If that file gets added to the list, when we start looping, we find it, and then we can immediately return it here. Saves us an API, several API calls, and should work. Probably won't, but we'll try it. We'll see what happens. All right, hop back over, send our asset over. And let's see. Could not find download URL in original skipping. Let's see, let's take a look at why that is. So could not find if URL in original. Oh, because I do that. Yeah. I don't want that else statement there. I want that to actually be, let's see, out here, I want to return false. So basically what I was doing is, because I had that else statement in there, right there, what was happening is it was looking at the very first return that came back, and in this case it was actually an ISG, so it didn't have a URL, and I had that else statement on the individual item, therefore it never even made it to the second item, and then it said, all right, well, then I'm going to not continue the loop because I told it to return false there. So I think I fixed it now. else on 89. Let's, okay, hold on. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. That should be good now. And send. Cool. Take a look. Bada boom. And let's see. So let's look at what we got here. Still returned false, but I did have the URL. So why did it return false? Let's go take a look at the code here real quickly. So if that happened and it did return, so that means it exited properly there, inside there, print original asset ID, that worked. Okay, let's kick this back out of debug now that it's actually running without crashing. Oops. So I'm gonna run it again. Because I got too much info being thrown at me. All right, so go here. Send. Look. And found original format ID there. Okay, so now let's put some better logging info in here on what's going out. So did find an original format ID there. Let's see. That's actually an error, not a debug message. All right, if file JSON in files JSON object, original files for this file. Logging.info found file for original format plus this file format ID. So we're going to have some info that's going on there. Cool. And logging.info checking if file has signed URL for file plus original file ID. Logging.info found URL. Cool. No, this return doesn't need to be here at all. Right? Oh, yeah, it does. So return false because it's already returned properly there. Cool. Let's try this again. YouTube. Cool. Okay, so that's strange because it does, right? It is actually working. Checking if URL in original file. Logging.debug JSON dumps original file. Oops, turn our debug back on. Up here. I probably should put that into a config file too, but easy enough to throw it where it is. Clear, kill, restart, kill. Send it back. Send. Take a look. What we got? All right. So got right here. Checking if URL assigned to site. That doesn't, but there should be the one above it, right? Which does. So found file original format there. Does have URL in the key. And that shouldn't even get to this point. So what did I do wrong? Because by rights, based on that information, right here, so we dumped it, checking if it has a URL. If URL in original file, and return original file URL. Let's do this too. yeah, that's all I should have to do. That's really strange. Python check if key in dict. I'm pretty sure I did that right. No. I mean, this is exactly what I'm doing, right? If URL in original file, an original file is a dict, and it is at the top level, correct? I'm not, here it is, right here, right? So, saying if URL is in that, it is. Why does it, why? All right, let's see. Okay, so obviously this is the culprit here, and maybe it's because I'm using Python 3. So Python 3, check if key in dict. Maybe it's different. Okay, let's try has key. Let's see if that works. Where is it? If original file dot has key URL. That's the method, right? Dict has key. Yes. Okay. See if it's more friendly with that. Right, there. Leave that behind. Send this. Dict has no attribute has key. Really? Thanks, internet. You failed me. Failed me horribly. Let's see. Anybody in chat know how to do this? Okay, it's method long. Okay, yeah, so key name in dictionary. That's exactly what I'm doing. Why is it evaluating incorrectly? It's exactly the version I'm using. It's exactly what it should be doing. So it should be if URL in original file, which is a dict. Found URL there. That should be working. Why are you not working? What am I doing wrong? This is like the last little bit we need to start sending stuff to YouTube. Let's see. It's right there. Ugh. Brutal. Okay. All right. Let's take this data set really quickly and see if let's just take this outside the context of our script. So I'm going to grab this, which we know is our data here. And I'm going to say, I'm going to just go into code, do this. And I'm going to say my data equals all this crap. And that's going to be that. And then I'm going to say JSON dot. Actually, that's just a fair one right there. And then I'm just going to say if URL in my data print yes. Save. Desktop. Garbage.py. terminal. Oh, hold on. I've got things that can't be used in the world of Python there. Okay. CD, desktop, Python, garbage. Yes. Okay. Okay. What is going on? Why? Why is that happening? Okay, so we get that back, and that's a valid. Well, maybe I should try to load it as a JSON object first, just to make sure with the nulls. Right. So and then, oops. Maybe my test is not a valid test. So import JSON and JSON.loads. I think it's loads. My data, my JSON equals if you are in my JSON. Now let's try this again. Python garbage. Yes. Okay. What? Why? So the exact same data set that I'm testing against right here. In original file. Or original file in original files. I'm in original file. Dumping the original file. And I did that, right? That's what's happening here, right here. So we get to that point, found file for original format. Here's the file info. There it is. Cool. And I say find file for original format for that format, and there it is. Cool. Checking if file has assigned URL for file whatever. It doesn't. That's fine. Where's the one that does? Right here. So this one has the URL, found file for original format, checking if file has assigned URL. And if we look in our code, it is found file for original format. We dump it out. We add it to the list. And then down here we have said checking for file has original URL. Then we dump out the data, right? Checking if file has signed URL for file. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Where'd my URL go? It's the same item. Why is the URL now gone? What did I do wrong there? So, because this is where we pass it. We pass this file, right? This file, format ID. Cool. Found original file format. That all worked. We know that worked. So, and then for original file and original files, checking if file has signed URL. Let's just do this really quickly. This is very dirty, but print original files. Not for original file. I just want to print it right here. Save, and let's rerun this. Should have a list up here somewhere. Right, yep, here's our list. And it's got a URL in it. In the second one, is the format ID not correct? That's the only thing I can, well, but it's here, right? So this is our list of original formats. Right here. And I can see that it's only actually one item long right now, and it does have the URL in it right there. And then we check if it's got the URL, and then all of a sudden it doesn't. I must be blind. I'm looking at something I'm making a really stupid mistake here. I guarantee it. So for original file and original files. Okay. So checking if for that. So this is the data set that we have right here. That's the original file, and it has the URL in there. And then we check it. And then immediately on the next line, we dump just the original file, and the URL is gone. What's up with that? I'm so stupid. That return shouldn't be there. I told the software to just exit at the very first loop this whole time. And now we run it, and it goes through, and everything looks like it works, right? And there it is. It found URL, popped right out exactly how I was expecting it to. So now we have our URL that we can download and put on things. Oh, okay, that was painful. I'm sorry you guys had to watch that. That was a less than stellar workflow process. You guys have just watched me for 2.5 hours, and the last 45 minutes of it was me stumbling on my own stupidity. But the good news is we've got something now. So we've got our file, we've got our authorization, everything along those lines. So we can actually get that file now. So our logic is sound. We return back successfully now in our run transfer this, right? So download URL is cool. Well, yeah, there we go. Download URL is that. And then we can really quickly here just say if download URL. Basically what that's saying, remember I returned false up here for this whole big thing that we just built. I return false everywhere other than if we actually get the URL back. So we can say if download URL, we'll start our next thing. Else logging.error could not find URL for original file. Boom. Okay. So now we can start on our next little bit. So we've now looked up the original file inside Iconik. So we got that done. We got the asset ID done. We're now erroring out if our watcher can't find the script. Since this is taking forever, we might have to come back to that one later. Next thing we got to do is download to our script computer. I'm going to take a real quick bathroom break while we do that, and then we're going to come right on back and start downloading our file to the local machine, and then we're going to fire it into our YouTube function to upload it, and then hopefully we'll have that going pretty quickly here. So stay tuned. I will be right back, and we'll start rocking from there. All right, we are back. Let's kick back over. I'm going to bring the audio down a little bit in the background so I can listen to music, but hopefully it isn't bleeding through and we don't get DRM taken down or something along those lines. All right, so, hey, we're getting places now. So now, to be honest with you, I've never actually downloaded a file with requests. I know it's completely doable, but I've always just grabbed it and stored it in memory. So let's Google really quickly. Download a file with Python requests. Should be pretty easy. Okay, URL equals whatever. Cool. All right. Okay, so there we go. We open a file with write, and then we write our .content to it. So seems pretty reasonable. We have our URL, right? That's the last thing we did. So now let's build a little function that downloads our file. And this will be this one should go pretty quickly. So we'll go here, hop over to our app, and we're going to make a new function here, and we're going to call this def download URL. And we're going to give it the input URL, and then alternately we are going to give it the download location, which we haven't defined. And you know what I think we're going to do is we're going to make that in our config file. All right, so let's slide back over to our config real quickly, and I'll make this local download path, and that's going to be, actually in this case, I'm just going to make it a folder called temp right inside the existing directory. We could make this, slash users, home, whatever, here, but I'm just going to throw it right in the same directory as, I'll make it /temp. I don't even think I need to do that. I can just do temp /. All right. So, and then we're going to grab that back into our function here and say, okay, r equals requests dot get URL. And then what's our little tutorial telling us to do here? And we're going to allow redirects, though we should not need them for this. This should be a direct, but we're going to say allow redirects equals true. And then we are going to open I guess we can what we should probably do is pass it the asset ID too, so that we have a file to do that with. Actually, you know what? We should probably pass it the name of the file so that we keep the file name the same, so you don't get too confused. So I'll just say file name here, and we'll go back up to our other function and pass that back along with it. We'll pass it back as a dictionary so that we don't have to worry about getting this someplace else. And we're going to open, and the open is going to be config.get YouTube local, what the heck did I call it? I already forgot what I called it. Local download path. Local download path, okay. That's just going to return a string plus, and then it's going to be a file name, comma, write. And we can see that right here. It's the exact same thing that we were doing over there. Right, and then we are going to say dot write r.content. Okay. And that should be good. Right? If r.status code equals 200, logging info, we got our file. And return this whole string. Else return false. All right. So let's give this guy a try. We're going to throw it back in here. If download URL, we're going to, oh, that's not download file from, that would have been really confusing. Download file from URL. Download URL, and the reason I'm doing this is I told you I was going to go back and turn this into dictionary so we can get the file name as well. And then config, oh, yeah. Config, oh, yeah, this is stupid. This is actually going to get passed for real over here. This is just going to be download location. There we go. Okay. Let's move this out of the way. And then, last but not least, we're going to pass download URL file name. Okay. And then we're going to say upload file equals to that because we're returning in that little thing, we're returning the actual path of the file that we downloaded. And then the last thing we got to do is we got to go back up to this little guy here, and when we do our return down here, which was the return for the original file, I'm actually going to return this as a dict, and it's going to be URL colon an original file, and then file name is going to be original file, and I think it's file name. Let's go take a look at our API response and see real quickly. All right. Name is what it is. Whoops. Name. So now I have file name. So this now returns a dict that's got both the URL and the file name. So I'm naming it the right thing when I save it, because otherwise it would just come back as probably whatever gibberish is stored inside that signed URL. All right, that should work. Okay. Let's see if this explodes. So we're running it, all good. Let's go back up. Oh, been working so long, my token timed out. Grab the same clip we've been working with this whole time. Where's the one that was on Backblaze as well? This guy. And to YouTube, let's see what happens. Okay. Process message. Well, it looks like it downloaded the file. Which I guess it didn't. Probably because there isn't a file there. Yeah. Temp. Maybe because the folder didn't exist. Look at that. All right. And if we look in temp, there's our movie. And if I hit play, look at that. Yeah, success. Okay, so now we are grabbing the file. I know that was a very long-winded way of doing this, but we now have a file inside of our temp directory. And now we can start working on uploading this back to YouTube, right? So let's work on the next. So let's go back to our design doc here. And here. And let's look here. So download files to our computer, upload the file to YouTube. Okay, so again, I've done a little bit of the homework on this. So what ends up what we've done here, let's see, I think I already opened it earlier, right? YouTube upload example. So we're going to throw in the scopes that are necessary here. Basically, we're going to grab all of this stuff and put it into a function. We're going to auth right away. So this auth flow thing, we're going to put at the top of our script, because every time we run our script now, we're going to have to start an auth flow with YouTube. That's what I described at the very beginning of it. And we're going to build the discovery API client. But this stuff is going to happen inside of our actual loop. Okay, so I'm going to grab all this stuff. And actually, I need another scope just because, let's see, where's my test? I need these scopes as well because we're going to use the same auth flow to get our favorite counts and like counts and stuff like that as well. So let's go back here and just replace this real quickly. And for now, I'm going to leave this thing that it says very, very strongly to not leave because I don't have a callback location. We'll figure that out later. And this is a hackathon, not how to roll out production grade code. So we're going to grab all this stuff, copy it all, and we are going to throw it into a Sophie. Chill. Come here. Here, sit down. Relax. No barkies. Okay. So we're going to take this and we're going to make a new function, which is going to be upload to YouTube. Def upload to YouTube, and it's going to take file path as the pointer. And then I'm going to I copied all that stuff. I didn't need all of it. The stuff I want to have in there is this, right? So building out our body request and response. And we'll actually, some of this stuff we're going to have to build some methodologies around inside Iconik really quickly, but meat of it is this stuff right here. What I want to do at the beginning of my script when it starts is I want to grab the other stuff from this YouTube script. So I'm going to go back and grab all this stuff. And this is actually going to start right when the script launches. So if I go back and kind of put it up at the top here. And what I've basically done now is we take in the auth info. So this all starts our YouTube auth flow. And that means when we start the script for the first time, it builds all this stuff out that can then be used inside of our definitions later. So we can say, all right, cool. We got our file path here, our snippet. We're just going to, for the sake of testing right now, I'm just going to use test, and we're going to test this out. And then I'm going to say return response, which is a JSON that comes from the upload to YouTube. And then down here, where's our run transfer? So upload file equals that, and then we can say if upload file, because again, remember our download file from URL function returns false if it didn't work properly. So if it returns true, we want to say YouTube info equals upload to YouTube and upload file. All right, so now let's see what happens. Fingers crossed. This is probably not going to work, but you'll see the first thing that happens is it pops up and asks me to auth the application because we're starting our OAuth flow now for YouTube as well. So I'm going to do the process, hit allow, copy the thing, move it back, hit go. Okay. Let's see what it's saying here. No module named. Did I not bring in the right? Let's say import error. Oh, no module named OAuth 2 client. I didn't import it into this one. I didn't grab enough. So where's all this stuff? And go back to our app here. I thought I grabbed all that stuff. Maybe I don't have. No, I've got it installed because it's working. The other one. Let's try this again. Cancel, kill, go. This fun process again. still not working right. Let's see what happens if we, it's probably going to puke when I actually send it the asset. But can try it anyway. Okay, we got our file. That's... I have no idea what happened. Well, it says making the post to OAuth, the Google's post token 200. It may have worked. That might have worked. Probably didn't, but it might have worked. When was that uploaded? That's not the same video though, so it didn't work. And the reason, let's add some code so we know why it didn't work, because we have no debugging in any of this stuff, right? So get our original file URLs all good, def this, so we can say we got our file, else return false, logging.error, problem downloading file, source file, and then upload to YouTube. We're going to say logging.info, trying to insert, wait, that'd be down here. Trying YouTube upload. Return response. And then down in our actual call here, we're going to say print YouTube info. Cool. That adds us a little bit more info as to what's going on. And then the other thing I want to do is I do have most things working without debug right now, so I'm just going to kick it back to info. So we're not getting flooded with all the debug messages. Which is probably a bad idea, but hey, it's Friday. That's what Fridays are for, bad ideas. I don't know what that means, but we'll if this doesn't work, we'll start figuring out what that means. So I'll go here. Found URL, trying YouTube upload. Look at that. That appears to have worked. Look at that, guys. All right. So we're getting there. It's happening slowly, but we're getting there. We've got our test video that came from Iconik was moved down, processed, and then moved over, I think. Oh, you know what? Okay. This is what happens when you copy and paste code too quickly, guys. Let's go take a look really quick. I know exactly what's going on here. Upload to YouTube. Media file upload. It's just grabbing the static one that I was using for a test instead of the file path. So everything was working, but we were passing it the wrong bit of info. Let's try this one more time. All right, so let's make sure we're not running. Clear, close, bang, reauth. I do wish there was a better way of handling this. There probably is. I just don't know what it is. Every time I kill my script, I gotta reauth the OAuth thing. Okay. So if we go now back to Iconik here and try sending this guy in again, and YouTube, let's go take a look. Found it, we got our file, trying to upload to YouTube. And we probably should do something smart, like see if the file actually exists that we're trying to send to YouTube first. But look at that. That worked. And if I hop back to YouTube Studio now and go back to our channel videos, and probably takes a second for it to actually show up. Bingo. We got 2 videos. Did we not? I know why. So what we have to do is, as soon as we get good information, we're going to have to send that ACK back to our pub sub, because what happened is that we didn't send the acknowledge before we started doing this whole upload download thing, and then because we didn't acknowledge it, it sent another message, and then it did another duplicate, and then it acknowledged it. So that's why we've got a couple here. So our timing on the acknowledge is a little bit too slow. But if we go take a look at the actual item, here we go. We can see the video is uploading. We can see it's being processed right now. Let's hop back. Oh, that was the second one. Let's go to the first one. So look at that. We have a YouTube video from Iconik right now. Hey Tim, I'm going to tell Tim that I'm in the middle of a live stream right now so he can bother me later. Hey Tim, I'm live streaming on Twitch right now. Can't help right away, but join us. All right, back to this. Okay, so now we want to do a few other fun things. Now that we've got our upload flow going. If we take a look at our original kind of like design here, we want to add some video information into Iconik metadata. We just got our upload working. Adding video information to the Iconik metadata means we got to make some metadata fields for this stuff to end up in. So this is just going back into Iconik and doing some config. I'm going to make a new metadata, some new metadata fields. I'm going to make a new view first that's called YouTube information. Info about items added to YouTube. Create that. And I'm going to make some new fields as well. So I'm going to make a new field, and I'm going to call it YouTube title. Actually, we'll just use the title from Iconik. We don't need to separate. Well, yeah, we probably do. We might want to call it something different on YouTube. So we will call it YouTube title. Whoops. There we go. And that's just going to be text. And then we're going to make a new field, and we're going to call that YouTube URL. And that's going to be a URL field. And that's going to be set to read only, because only the API is going to update that. And we're going to make a new field, and we're going to call this YouTube ID. And that's going to be a text field, and that's going to be read only. And we're going to say YouTube description, and that's going to be a text area. We're going to make another field, and we're going to call this YouTube privacy. And we're going to make that a drop down, and we're going to add public, unlisted, private to that, and that's going to be public. Okay, and then we're going to make a few more fields here, and these are going to all be integer field, and it's going to be YouTube views. Okay, and YouTube likes, and that's going to be an integer field. And YouTube dislikes, integer field. And YouTube favorites, and that's an integer field. And then last but not least, I'm going to make YouTube last updated stats, and that's going to be a date field. And we're going to take this all now, and we are going to put it into our view. So let's find our YouTube view. So here, YouTube information, and then I'm going to filter by my YouTube things here. So I'm going to say, yeah, sure, YouTube. Description, dislikes, favorites, YouTube ID, all this sort of stuff. And cool. And then I'm going to actually reorganize this a little bit, just so it looks a little bit better. And I'm going to make a few things. So I'm going to say video info up top, and then we're going to say video statistics down here. Video statistics down here. And let's see, and then, yeah, I guess that's all we need, really. So we'll put the ID up above, and we will make the privacy up above, because that's something we want to change. And then the URL, we want to be up here as well. And then these guys, that's read-only already. This guy I also want to make read-only. Cool, that's good. And then we're going to do views at the top, and then likes, and then dislikes, and then favorites, and then last updated status. And then I'm actually going to change the names on some of these because it's obviously all YouTube. So I'm just going to say in the view, we're going to get rid of the word YouTube all over the place just to make it a little bit more readable. Remember that the metadata fields themselves are still going to be called YouTube whatever. We can still query them by all that, but in this particular view, it's not going to be. Okay, last update stats. And update, cool. And then that's good, that's good. Update and description, and last but not least, title. Cool. All right. So now what we have done is actually taken all of the YouTube info and made it into a searchable or a usable bit of metadata for a given asset. So now if we hop into that asset, I go to YouTube information, now I can put in info here. So I can say this is my demo video for YouTube, and description is this, whoops, YouTube, this is the first one with good info coming out, and then we'll say that's public for right now. These other things will fill in with the API after the fact. So I'll just go in, and you'll notice that I have these set so that they can't actually be modified, I don't think. Oh, I forgot to set these ones to read only, so let's go fix that really quickly too. Metadata, YouTube info, and then all of these guys should be read only. And probably hide if not set too. We don't necessarily care about these things showing up if it's never run the stats on them. All right, that, and this guy is also if not set. There. Cool. So now our statistics are all good and everything's good there. Same with these. We'll make these hide if not set too, because if the video hasn't actually been uploaded yet, why show them at all? All right, so let's go back to our clip, take a look, and take a look at our YouTube form now. Cool. So it looks a lot cleaner. Obviously, when we go into it, we can switch it to whatever we want, but now we can't modify any of the stats info. Only the API is going to be able to do that. Oops. Not what I wanted to do. Yeah, so all good. All right. So let's take a look at our how far we've come so far. So we've got all of the video uploading. We want to add video information to Iconik metadata. So if we take a look at what came back from the YouTube upload, we get quite a bit of this information back in the JSON that gets dumped back from YouTube. So if I do this really quickly, that and mjson.tool. Oh crap! It's got something in there it doesn't like. So let's just take it and copy it into VS Code, and that can do it for us. I think there's a. Whoops. No. Ah, crap. Oops. improper data in here. Really? All right, well, whatever. Let's do it by hand a little bit here, just so we can kind of see what the information we get back is, because that response is going to be usable to get all this info, right? So it should be a safe dict that we get back. So that we can figure out where our data lives, and if we want to, which information we want to put back into Iconik, right? So there's that, and that. I actually really don't know why this was not formatting properly with JSON, but we'll figure it out. Okay, there. Oh, there's another thing we might want to do. Let's add some tags options too, because when we're uploading this, and maybe a category option as well, because those are things that we put into the response, right, that we got. So let's make some fields for that as well inside Iconik. Let's go metadata, and we'll call fields, and make a new field, and we will call it YouTube tags. And this will be a tag cloud. And cool. And last but not least, we'll say YouTube category. And this will be a drop down. And what we should probably do in this case, YouTube, if you notice in the data set that comes back here, the category, let's hop back over to VS Code so you can see this. The category was an ID. So we got to figure out what the heck the category IDs are for YouTube. Let's Google that really quickly. So YouTube category IDs. YouTube category list. There we go. There you go. Here's all of our lists. So, so let's go through this really quickly, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to use a tool that I built a while ago, so we don't have to do this all by hand in a second to upload these to our field. But first, let's add our field into our views, our fields into our views. So go here, YouTube info, and YouTube again, and we're going to add category and tags, and those are going to go up underneath info here, and tags, and we're going to rename those tags and category just for the sake of cleanliness. And, oops. And I think this one I want hide if not set to. Yeah, cool. All right. So I wrote this little thingamajig a while ago that is just a metadata list builder. So it's a real simple Python script that basically imports lists into like longer text lists that I have in a file into a specific field. And I'm going to be super ghetto about this, and I'm just going to make it, save it, list builder.py, throw it into the same folder, terminal, let's run it real quick, cd, code, desktop code, Iconik, YouTube, okay, period, and make sure it runs properly. So Python list builder does. Cool. All right. So now I got to go and make a file real quickly that is my list, which we just copied from YouTube. And then I want to do this really quickly. Copy, find, dashes, and we're going to replace them all. Well, we're going to find that, and we're going to replace it all with a comma. Place it all. Cool. So now we got all that. Let's fix that one too, because I didn't like the way that looked. Save that as YouTube categories.csv. And we can close it now. And, oh, actually, I should probably double check, make sure there was no special characters in there. There was. Fix the special characters. Cool. Oh, and film an animation. And auto and vehicles. Boom. Okay, cool. All good there. And now we're going to run my little... Whoops. No, we're not going to run edit ready. Sorry, guys. So we're going to do that. -u. And we can grab that from our config file. Find one that I've got that's handy. Alright, so here we go. App ID and dash. What the heck is it? -u -s is my secret. Okay, and -i is YouTube categories.csv, and -f is, I gotta read my own documentation because it's been a while since I've used this. Oh, it's just the unique name. So let's go look that up really quickly. I think it's just YouTube categories, right? YouTube category. So it's that. Should work. Should have worked. Let's see what happened. Cancel. Open that again. I don't know if it worked. I don't think it did. I think I screwed something up. Let's see. No. Oh, I did it backwards. I put the values in and not the keys. Oops. YouTube category. Let's trash all these. Fix. Okay, and let's go modify our file really quickly. Probably at this point I could have copied and pasted them all in faster. But hey, you know. Open. And our categories. And then comma 2. Sure, there's probably a smarter way to do this. Crap. 18. There. You know, I could have just opened it in Excel and dragged the column over. That would have been smarter. But now that I've half done it, now I'm stuck. Made poor choices. Oops. That was 30. I just remembered that one. And far be it he who says that watching somebody type in an Excel sheet on a Friday afternoon is not the most interesting thing you've ever watched in your life. Crap, did it again. There. Hey Tim, how's it going, man? Saw you joined the chat. All right. Oh, we're so close, and it just feels like it's so far away because I'm just... If I was better with like set or something like that, I could have written a script faster than doing this. Written a script to write a script to feed the data to a script that I've already written, right? That's the way it goes. Boom, run it again. Cool. Now that I've fixed that, and then we go take a look at an asset and go to our YouTube and go to our categories, and look at that. Now it looks proper. Cool. Awesome. So that work's done. Okay. So let us now start to build a parser for, and if anybody was curious, it's just github.com/Szumlinski. That's got some fun scripts on it. That is not where we're going to be putting the output of this stuff, and I'm going to migrate some of this stuff into our Iconik one eventually here, but there is some fun scripts in there if you want to poke around and look at some of the history of the stuff I've done over the years and how much worse or better I've gotten. I don't even know. All right. So we've got all this in place now. So let's take a look at back in our code here. Close that guy. And close that guy. And take a look at the data that we're inputting, right? So if we take a look, and close that guy now because we're done with that part. Close that guy down because we're done with that part. We may need to come back to that guy. And close that guy because we're done with him now. Keep that open. Close that one. Leave that notepad open. All right. I think we've closed enough windows now to not be as messy. All right, and we did this. So we've got now inside the response from you, or inside what we post to YouTube, is this little JSON here, right? Or this dict, right? Which is a snippet, and then inside the snippet, it has all of these various different. Let's try to make this a little cleaner. Little bits, and it's pretty obvious what these bits are, right? You can tell what these are. We just finished kind of adding all the stuff that we need for this to work inside of our forms, right? So we can see we got the snippet itself, and then title is our YouTube title, description is the description, tags are our tags, category ID is our category ID, and then the privacy status is private. So what we want to do now is, as part of this function, we're going to get the information out of Iconik that we put all that information into, so that we can not have it always say test, right? And so to do that, we're going to need to do just a real simple get on the metadata for that specific asset and then reformat it. So the first thing we're going to do is an r equals requests.get, and it's going to be Iconik URL plus, and let's hop back over and look at our, do I have a window open with, yeah, here it is. And we're not dealing with files anymore now, we're dealing with metadata. So we're going to go to our metadata class. And we're going to say, okay, we're going to get metadata based on the view ID and the object ID and the object type. Okay, so it's going to be, if we hop back to our code here, and look, it's going to be slash metadata v1, and then assets is the object type. Object ID is going to be plus, oh, you know what we're going to need? We need our asset ID here too. plus asset ID. And then we're going to need, let's say, views, and then now we're going to pull our view from a config file, because I think we should do that. So we're going to do config.get Iconik, and we're going to do YouTube metadata view. Cool. And then headers equals Iconik headers. And that's going to get us back our metadata. We got to go fix a couple things first. Well, first we got to go make this new thing in our config file, right? So let's go config, and inside of Iconik, we're going to have a YouTube metadata view, and that is going to be equal to, let's go look it up. We just go into Iconik, admin, metadata, and there's our YouTube information. Copy that ID, toss it in here, boom, done. So now we got that information available. And then, go away. We're going to say if r.status code equals 200, again, making sure we got our response back okay. Logging.debug, I'm just going to dump out our info here, JSON dumps, r.json, indent equals 4. I say logging.info, look, found metadata for asset ID plus asset ID. Okay. And now we're gonna have to put some information in there really quickly and get our metadata back, so we know how to parse that and then turn it into this information down here. So let's hop back over to our API browser, and we're gonna say view ID is that, because I still had it copied. Object ID is where's the guy we've been working on all day today? We just keep using the same one because it's easy. 3800 here. And that asset ID is this. Okay. And, whoops. Didn't want to leave there. I want to go here. Object ID that, and then assets. And if I hit run, boom, I get back all the information. Now, obviously, I haven't actually put much in there yet, so let's go put the actual info in that we want for this particular YouTube video. So pop out our metadata, go to our YouTube, hit edit, and then we're going to say category is, I don't know, technology, right? Or computers and technology. Computers? No. What do they call it? I don't even remember what they call it. Science and technology. All right, tags. And we're going to say Iconik, mic, and demo. We'll make it public. Cool. Update that. Get our metadata again really quickly. So now we actually have what the response is going to bring back. So I'm going to copy this over into VS Code just so that we can have it clean. So just throw that on the desktop, and we'll say metadata.json. I'll clean that up later. And so what we're going to do is we need to go through each one of these and essentially extract the information out of it so that we can put it into our other dictionary. So I'm going to take this guy and split him off to the right here, just so that we can still see it at the same time, and hop back to this one. So we now have our JSON right now, which is this. And what I can do is just say metadata equals r.json, just to make it easier to remember what we're doing down here. And I'm going to actually just look at the metadata values, because that's this dict right here, right? If I collapse this, you can see that's everything. I kind of don't care about everything else right now. I'm just going to look at the metadata values. And then from there, I can say, okay, I need to do some things. You'll notice, like, tags, for example, are comma separated in the format for YouTube. So I'm going to find my tags field really quickly here. And collapse some of these other ones just so it's easier to see. Likes, privacy, tags. Okay, so if I go for for tags in metadata YouTube tags, right? Because that's the dict that it's living in inside metadata values. And then field values, that's the list that we got here. Before I do this, I'm going to say tag YT tags equals just an empty string. Actually, I don't even think I need to do that. I can do this. So 4 tags in there. Yeah, maybe I should do that. Like YT tags equals an empty list. And then I'm going to say YT tags append value. Tags value. Right, so I'm in field values. Each one of these tags is a field value here. It's inside this dict, and I'm going to grab the value of that particular item. And then I'm going to say so tags is actually, I'm exiting that loop now, and I'm going to just say tags equals YT tags.join, comma, right? And that's basically just saying turn that list that I created up here into a string. And then I can now down here pass tags into our little info. So that's tags. Let's get title. So title is going to be, let's see, I think that's just a straight string, right? So YouTube title is going to be metadata YouTube title field values. And notice that field values is a list over here, so it's never going to have more than one thing in it in this case. So I'm going to go 0 for the first one, and then value. So now I'm going to pass that as the title. Same thing for description. You'll notice that description, wherever that is, that's up here. It's the same setup. And a lot of the fields in Iconik are going to be very similar to this, unless they actually are fields that have multiple values. So I'm going to go YouTube description. Tags we already figured out. And then category ID, let's take a look at that. So that's going to be metadata. Let's make it bigger so we can make sure we're not doing anything wrong here. YouTube category field values 0 value. All right. And then privacy status, we're going to do, again, same thing, but with the privacy status. So, and I should probably fix the fact that that's U2, not YouTube. So where is that? YouTube privacy. Make sure that it's all good. Yep. YouTube privacy. Field value 0 value. And then I'm going to do this one to lower. I think it's to lower. Let me double check that. Because YouTube's API seems to want lowercase, all normalized. So Python convert string to lowercase. I think it's just to lower. Dot lower. I think it's just dot lower. Yeah, dot lower. Okay. Not too lower, it's just dot lower. Okay, so lower. Boom. So there we go. Hit save. And now, in theory, if we fire this bad boy back up again, let's close that and quit you. Okay, that. If I didn't screw anything up. Copy, not back, paste, enter, starts its thing. We know that that was a problem as well. And then we hop back to this asset and we say send to YouTube, and we go take a look at what's going on. Hopefully, come on, you can do it. All right. There it goes. Found original file, found URL. It's probably downloading right now. Okay, missing run. Okay. My function that I changed earlier, I forgot to pass the asset ID back to it again. Let's close this for now. Remember down here in our download or our upload to YouTube, because we use asset ID in there to make this API call, I forgot to put it back in down here. So where is it? Upload file up there, and asset ID. We already have it from up top here. So clear that, run that, do our little song and dance again, copy. Oh, it already took it because it never acted the other one, so it's downloading again. Oh, what did I do wrong? Spelled the word tags wrong. Tages. All right. Easy to fix. Tages. Tags. Oh, crap. Cleared the screen too fast. How's that? Close that. Open a new one. Go there. Do that. Copy that. Move it over there. Paste it there. Runs. And since we've never had a successful run, there it goes. It's downloading again. And what did I do wrong now? List object has no attribute join. Oh, I think I passed it back to something that already existed, didn't I? Yeah, oops. I already used tags up here. That was a bad idea. All right, close tab, there. And if any... Oh, hey, somebody's asking me if I want to become famous by buying Prime views at some crappy site and then spamming me. We've made it, guys. We have spammers in the chat. Yes. Success. This is what true success is. Okay, let's go authenticate this stupid thing. What did I do wrong here? Okay. List object has no attribute join. Yes, it does. I literally used it somewhere else in here, didn't I? Join. Yeah. Now I'm just starting to go a little woozy. Oh, I did it backwards. That's why. All right, so this seems really stupid, but what I was supposed to do is pass it that, and then what I wanted to actually pass. So the string joins by these values, and now it should work. it's astonishing to me how often I've used Python and how the basics still are not memorized by me, even in the slightest. I make that mistake all the time. All right. 10th time's a charm. God damn it. What do we do? Ah, that's why. I spelled things wrong again. Because I'm missing the T. File. Title. Let's double check this. Let's do what our parents used to yell at us for not doing when we were kids, and double checking our work before we turned it in. Yeah, let's do that. All right. YouTube description, category, privacy. This all appears to be spelled right now. So what did I spell wrong this time? All right, can't do there. There's another good reason why you should always use very small files when you're testing these sorts of things, because if this was a 100 gig ProRes file, it would be really painful doing this on loop. All right, here's to hoping. Looks like it's uploading. I'm also uploading me talking to you guys, so my YouTube uploads are admittedly a little slower than they'd normally be at this point. But it does appear that it is sending the file. You can see up here it shot up to a couple megabytes a second a few seconds ago. I don't think that's blocking. That's kind of weird. Oh, okay. The write operation timed out. So, in run transfer, okay. That's interesting. I wonder if that's just an internet problem right now. My internet not working right? Can anybody still hear me out there? Hopefully. Let's troubleshoot this really quickly. Okay, let's see. Been uploading for a while now. Let's do the old fast.com tests. Yeah, that ain't right. Oh, that's getting a little bit better, but still not right. All right, it's getting back to normal. Let's try this one more time. Shit. There goes my first time swearing in 4 hours of writing code. That's pretty impressive, actually. And it wasn't even because I wrote bad code, it was because I deleted things too fast. Alright, hop back, paste it in. Does seem strange. Let's refresh the stream manager and see if I'm getting a feed. Yeah, it looks like it's still working. Is YouTube throttling me? Did I do something silly like outrun my daily amount of YouTube API calls while testing? Oops. Oh, there we go. It's working. Now let's try another one. It may have failed the actual upload process, but if we go take a look at the assets that got created here, check it out. It's actually got the appropriate information that got passed in from our metadata, and it's got all the tags that we added in as well. So all the information put in from Iconik got there. It says it's processing the video. Don't know why it's taking this long. I feel like it should have finished by now, but this one's actually got this one looks like it's online. Yeah, there we go. So we actually have a YouTube URL. If we go hit this in YouTube for real, here's our quick one, and great. Now we can see, you know, everything. Let's give it a like, just so that we have some data to work with for our next stop. Okay, so let's go take a look at what we got going so far. So we know right now from our log list of things to do, we've now added information from Iconik metadata. What we haven't done yet is parsed back out the item ID and link to the item and put it back into Iconik. And since we are getting close to the end of the day right now, I think what we might do is just stop there. And maybe I'll fire up another stream next week where we can pick up where we left off or something along those lines. But we'll get these two things done because we do have that information working. We are getting the response back from YouTube. Well, sometimes. I have exceeded the amount of quotas for the day. Well, maybe it is time for us to stop because I'm doing something wrong and YouTube's not letting me upload with the API anymore. It does seem like a very small amount of uploads for testing, but it's very clear that they don't want me to be doing this anymore. So that was fun, guys. We mostly got there. We got kind of cut off in the middle, probably because I don't understand YouTube's quota system, or I'm not a big enough YouTuber to let them have me upload more than a couple videos a day via the API or something along those lines. But you can see exactly why we're running into this problem, and we're going to probably have to wait 24 hours for that to go. Anybody that hung out the whole time, I really appreciate it. Any of you guys that just slid in and said hello for a few minutes, that's always awesome as well. Yeah, you know, we didn't get as far as we did last time, but we did accomplish some things. If you look down our laundry list here, we got our custom action, we got our cloud function working, we got our pub sub queue working, we started to build our script, we're getting our asset IDs, we're looking up the originals, we're erroring out if we can't find an original, we download the file to our script computer, we upload the file to YouTube, we add the video information, and the only thing we're missing here are these two guys from the first half of it. So maybe what we'll do is we'll come back around to this guy, and then next time we'll add in the things like checking the view counts periodically, checking the favorites of the videos that we've got inside of YouTube from Iconik, and making all that searchable information as well. But kind of hard to continue this when I don't have any more API credits left within YouTube. So that's on me. But thanks, everybody. I think we're going to call it a day for the stream. Have a great weekend. We will be in touch soon, and you know, keep hacking away, man. We'll talk later. Stream ending now. Bye.